Ukraine unless it was tied to a bill that secured the border. So Democrats were like, bet, sounds good. A bipartisan group of senators get together to come up with a bill that'll appeal to both Democrats and Republicans. It's not gonna be everyone's cup of tea, but that is compromise. But then, literally before the bill is even announced, a handful of far-right Republicans start saying, hey, I'm not gonna vote for it. And that's even before they knew what the it was. And then all of that escalated after Trump came out against the bill. Again, before knowing what was actually in it, and encouraging more Republicans to do the same, which of course they are. He is the presumed nominee. And the reasoning here is he literally doesn't want it perceived that Biden got a win on the border so he can keep campaigning on it. So in no way was it surprising that just hours after the bipartisan deal was announced, House Republicans said it was dead on arrival. With them then going on to Fox News to complain they were left out of the negotiations, even though they refused to be part of the negotiation, instead insisting on their own version of a border bill.
I could tell you from the get-go, if President Biden and the Senate were serious about these negotiations, they would have included House Republicans.
The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, says that he hasn't
Johnson.
Any
John Mikeson
bill, that he hasn't been brought in on the negotiations. That doesn't seem like a way to get a bill passed into law.
Well, that's the Senate for you.
They also claimed that the border.
That's the Senate for you.
Democrats were failing to pass Democrats have helped negotiate a bipartisan
That's the
Senate
Senate for you. That's what the interviewer said. She was like, that's the Senate for you. Oh, God.
That doesn't seem like a way to get a bill passed into law.
Well, that's the Senate for you.
They also
That's
claim
the
that the border
Senate
is
for
their top
you.
priority. They
I mean, it's
Democrats
true.
are failing to create solutions. But again, that's even though Democrats have helped negotiate a bipartisan Senate bill that has support from key Republicans.
Engaged.
And the border bill that House Republicans keep pushing for has literally zero bipartisan support in the House.
Is there any prospect for getting
Autopilot
something
disabled.
meaningful and constructive
No
between
waypoint
now
set.
and the election, or are we just going to have to wait and see who wins the next presidential race?
That would be up to Democrats. I mean, Republicans want to secure the border. This is the top priority. I said in conference that I would not only vote for, I would promote a bill that funds Ukraine to help the Ukrainian people, but also secures the border. But I'm not going to vote for a bill that is going to hamstring a future president.
And that's kind of the main argument that we've seen from Republicans against the bill, right? That it really doesn't go far enough for them, and they just want everyone to adopt the partisan House immigration bill. Others also saying the legislation will just incentivize more immigration, painting it as an open border and amnesty bill. Although very notably, we saw experts and Republicans actually involved in writing this bill pushing back against that, saying that it actually includes a lot of major GOP asks and concessions from Democrats. And so with this, we've seen a lot of people condemning Republicans for undermining the bill, criticizing the hypocrisy, claiming they don't want actual solutions, saying rather than actually caring about America, it's more about making Biden look bad. And importantly, though probably not big enough, it's not coming from just Democrats. We've also seen some conservative voices speaking out, including Representative Dan Crenshaw.
The height of stupidity is having a strong opinion on something you know nothing about. I'm extremely disappointed in the very strange maneuvering by many on the right to torpedo a potential border reform bill. If we have a bill that, on net, significantly decreases illegal immigration, and we sabotage that, that is inconsistent with what we told our voters we would do. People will make up whatever reasons they want to. There's a number of them, I'm sure. But it would be a pretty unacceptable dereliction of your duty.
Which I will say, it's been absolutely wild, and I could not have predicted that Dan Crenshaw, of all people, would be the guy that, like, speaks truth to power in his own party at times. Like, that is the state of things. But ultimately, that is where we are. I personally do not have high hopes for this bill, and that is because you have politicians who are unwilling to compromise in the way they initially wanted to compromise, because they would rather not provide solutions, campaign, and angle for the 2024 election than provide the change that they promised to the people that voted them in.
Politicians want only power?
Today. We dive into those comments on the last show and see what y'all are saying, if you're debating. You know, looking into those comments, there were some big things, like the summoner saying there's something so ironic about a senator telling someone else they have blood on their hands, and people being blown away by the "Senator, are you Chinese?" back and forth. But what was selfishly most interesting to me was how y'all view the show, right? Whether you think about it like it's a podcast. Because while there are a number of comments that just absolutely love the deep dive into the podcast industry, they'll also left comments like, I find it interesting that he doesn't necessarily see this show as a podcast. I listened to it on YouTube while going to work. The content is so descriptive with clips having audio. I thought this was a podcast with video, not a video that could be a podcast. And that seemed to be the majority opinion there. You know, often describing like what a podcast is something that you're listening to or kind of paying attention to while you're doing other stuff. You drive and you cook and maybe you're pooping. And with that, beautiful bastards like Nicole saying, y'all remember the days of YouTube where shows had to be under 10 minutes? It's just funny to me how if a Philip DeFranco show is under 20 minutes, that I feel short. I love these long episodes. And I will say, I was happy to see those comments because while I don't often talk about like the nuts and bolts of like the show's creation. Oh, it's nighttime? I was magically transported. Back home. Back in December, I was really wondering, like, what do I want the future of the show to be? I kind of saw two options. One, we go more single topic videos. So you might get 2 to 3 videos a day. Some of those videos might be 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 8 minutes. Or we really lean into the idea that this is a daily news podcast. And last Thursday, I think, kind of touched on what I want for the future of the show. I think without filler, especially if we expand the team a little bit, we can do 25 to 45 minutes. Oh my God, that number scares me. But we could reasonably and repeatedly do shows like that, which then opens up more ad inventory, makes everything that much more viable, all while still including time codes on the show so people can jump to stories they might be more interested in, all while at the same time still uploading individual stories to PDS news clips. But again, like, this isn't happening tomorrow. This is more explaining the path I would like the show to take, with me making small incremental changes that get us there over time. I mean, like Nicole even said, remember, this show actually used to be a 2 to 3 minute news show. We didn't get to 15 to 30 overnight. I'm a toe dipper, not a cliff jumper. But that is where I'm gonna end today's show. Thanks for watching, commenting on, and sharing the show. But hey, I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.
It was good. Thank you, Triple Jump, for the excellent cuts from a stream. I'd like to sub to your channel. This is called What Went Wrong with the Sega Saturn. Sega Saturn.
Since bowing out of the console race over 20 years ago, we're still yet to see anyone quite like Sega, hitting lofty heights and shocking lows with as much breakneck speed as their nippy blue hedgehog, all in the space of a decade. It's no wonder the saga of Sega in the 90s still holds an air of reverence. A true veteran of the console wars, this plucky underdog, or underhog if you will, managed an impossible feat. At the height of Nintendo's power, they beat that Goliath at their own game, taking the home console market by storm with the hip, trendy, and oh so radical Mega Drive, or Genesis, if you want to get Sega of America about this. For an all too brief moment in the early 90s, they were on top of the world until it all came crashing down in a storm of company division, fierce competition, and baffling decisions in a swiftly changing market. And one console sits at the heart of this storm, the Sega Saturn. This was to be Sega's entry into the 32-bit market, and on paper the run-up was perfect. Old rivals Nintendo were running late, and Sony were cocky but inexperienced newcomers. But somehow Sega fumbled, and in a cruel twist of fate, the Saturn's legacy became famous not for its own accomplishments, but the actions of their new challenger, whose legendary $2.99 mic drop moment at E3 1995 left the more expensive Saturn dead upon arrival. The poor thing only lasted a few hours. The Saturn still gained a good cult following, as its top-quality arcade ports, hidden gems, and unique blend of 2D and 3D hardware gave it an unmistakably distinct personality. However, it was also a masterclass in how not to break into the newly emerging 3D console space. And because the Saturn was so intrinsically linked with Sega's turn of fortunes, it makes this story such a fascinating one, covering not just a single console failure, but the beginning of the end for Sega's hardware empire. So get comfy, grab your funky Nights into Dreams hat, and sink into that Daytona bucket chair, because it's one hell of a ride to Saturn. For full context, let's head back to the origin point of Sega, or should we say, Sega's Genesis? I don't get it. All the way back in 1940, Sega was founded under the name Standard Games, producing coin-operated arcade games in Hawaii before moving to Japan in 1952 and becoming Service Games of Japan. Hey! Pay attention, this is relevant, if only to remember Sega's long history in the arcade business, decades before video game tech, where mechanical games and slot machines were the norm. Don't dare fall asleep. Of course, Sega's story really picks up in the 90s thanks to their generation-defining Genesis and/or Mega Drive. Following their humble SG-1000 and Master System, the third time was the charm. Launching in 1988 to 1989, the Genesis got ahead of the upcoming Super Nintendo by a couple of years, and while it couldn't dislodge Nintendo's firm grasp in Japan, in Western markets, it was a smash hit. In 1990, Sega hired Tom Kalinske, you might have heard of him, as president of Sega of America to push the advantage in the US, and a year later, a certain Rapid Blue Boy debuted, kickstarting the golden era for Sega. Armed with Sonic, a sassy, speedy mascot infinitely cooler than a plump, mustachioed plumber, along with a relentless marketing campaign dissing their rivals with classic slogans like Sega does what Nintendo don't, all while pushing their hardware superiority with gimmicks like blast processing, Sega cleaned up the competition. Suddenly, they had the hip, trendy console compared to the childish Nintendo with all their baby games. Project Saturn began as early as 1992, as despite success in the West, Japan was no closer to joining Team Blue.
More detail on the Saturn's design is coming soon, but let's just say Sega became increasingly worried about the competition, which influenced their 32-bit machine considerably.
With the Panasonic 3DO and Atari Jaguar already out and Sony's upcoming console gaining hype, Sega started bolting on parts to Saturn's existing hardware and pushing for an earlier launch, along with a stopgap solution to stall their rivals, the 32X add-on for the Genesis. This visible panic was a far cry from their cool confidence of the Genesis era.
On the 21st of November 1994, the 32X launched in North America, while one day later, their next generation Saturn arrived in Japan.
Crucially, they beat PlayStation to the punch by a couple of weeks in Japan, and amazingly, this plan worked. At least to begin with. Despite boasting only 2 exclusives out of 5 launch titles, Saturn sold 500,000 units compared to PlayStation's 300,000. Truly a Christmas miracle! In the US, Saturn was set for a September 1995 launch, heavily marketed as Saturn Day, the second.
Yeah, it was like, we were all like 12 years old. It was like the baby boomers that all had kids. And we were all like 12 years old. And yeah, here we go. So I'm out here now. Yep, cool. So we will mine you. Yep, and I'll just do that for a while. I guess we'll do these few. Yeah, and we'll do the mining drone on you, but oh no, I want I want you on you and you and you, right? Because the beam is instant, yeah. But the beam is hit scan. The drones are projectile, so it's better to have them hit closer, I guess. So yeah, there's all the stuff that I usually have. That's good. And yeah, we'll go back to where we were, which was like up there. I was looking at that whole bit. Yeah, I think it was. Is that right? Yes, it is. Very good.
But Sega of Japan couldn't hold their nerve, and encouraged by the early lead, they told Kalinske the release date would be secretly brought forward.
The new date, May the 11th, 1995, at the inaugural E3 trade show, where a simple 3-digit number would change Sega's fate forever.
$299.
Oh, poor Saturn. That's got to be the worst first day on the job ever. Now, you may already be familiar with Sony's infamous mic drop moment at E3 1995, but the finer details are fascinating, so let's dive in.
Sega took the stage first as Tom Kalinske announced to the world that their upcoming 32-bit Saturn wasn't coming out in September, it was available right now. 30,000 Saturns were shipped out to Toys R Us, Babbage's, Electronics Boutique and Software etc., ready for sale immediately at $399 a pop as part of a summer rollout. What a delightful surprise, right?
The problem was, this wasn't just a surprise to the general public, but to pretty much everyone else.
Major retailers like Best Buy and Walmart were understandably furious about being left out of the loop, and KB Toys even dropped Sega's products from store shelves entirely. Developers were angry about this release date, as many would miss a golden opportunity to be part of a console launch lineup, not to mention the damage this would do to a future player base and future sales for their own products. Even fans were annoyed, given they only shipped 30,000 units, making it near impossible to get a Saturn on launch day. This surprise shadow drop was misguided enough, but then Sony delivered the killing blow.
On the same stage, on the same day, Steve Race, the head of Sony Computer Entertainment, is due on stage for a so-called brief speech.
Race calmly walks up to the podium, shuffles his big stack of papers around, pauses, and says one thing. $299. And the
$299.
crowd goes wild. With just 3 digits,
comes up,
Sony
says $299,
single-handedly
that's it.
destroyed what little credibility Saturn had left, undercutting its price by $100. What really adds some spice to this story is that Steve Race
$299.
previously worked for Sega. In fact, he was Kalinski's right-hand man in marketing, a major part of the genius behind the Genesis success story. Kalinski stated himself years later that Steve knew all our secrets, but despite the supposed insider knowledge, Race had been debating with Sony about their own price right up until the morning, I'm quoting there, of E3 itself. The Saturn had been sunk by the same guy that helped kickstart Sega's golden age.
As if that's not enough drama, Race resigned from Sony a couple of months after, before the PlayStation even launched in America due to disagreements with their head office in Japan. What a roller coaster.
Back to E3, and the 32-bit battle broke out in full swing after the presentations. Sega turned up their booth speakers near Sony, drowning out their demos. Sony set up posters saying if you bought a Saturn, your head was in Uranus. Steve Race, the petty man, even popped Kalinski's inflatable Sonic. What a villain. Must have taken ages to pick up all those rings it dropped.
The Saturn's fate seemed a cruel irony for Kalinski, a man who helped organise the first E3, but despite that, he never seemed too bothered, almost as if he knew how doomed they were from the start. The big $299 looked like a knockout blow, but the Saturn had already entered the ring dazed and confused. The Genesis did so well partly thanks to its early lead, releasing 2 years before the Super Nintendo. This wasn't a new tactic, however, as Sega's company ethos has always been, gotta go fast.
Remember their coin-op arcade routes we mentioned when you all fell asleep? No, you were paying attention. In that market, embracing new technology and providing the latest cool gimmicks was key to keeping customers coming and the coin flowing. But playing at the cutting edge means sometimes you end up injuring yourself. On the back of the Genesis, quite literally, came the Sega CD in 1991. This add-on represented an early step towards the disc-based future of gaming. Sadly, it flopped commercially, what with a retail price of $300 being more expensive than the host console itself, and all for a low number and low quality of titles.
It's a minor footnote in the Saturn story, but one Sega
The
CD
$300
developer
back then
is
was
noteworthy,
$600 back then.
Sony ImageSoft, who Sega helped on the software side.
The Super Nintendo was $129.99. And it stayed that way the whole 7 years they sold it or whatever it was. And, so then they started saying PlayStation is $239 and Xbox is $339 and PlayStation 4 is $449 and PlayStation 5 is $549 and, now it's like insane. It's insane what a fucking 13-year-old kid is expected to pay. I think their parents now need to just invest in the Master Race PC that's got Xbox Games Pass on it. Give them a controller and be like, use the computer for school and you must study and be really good and get good grades and go to school and get a good job and all this, and you'll be able to play video games on your computer. We're not buying you a $600 PlayStation 6. It's just not, it's not, financially viable. But what we will do is buy you a piece of crap $1,200 gaming PC that'll stream games on a good internet connection perfectly at 120 frames per second or more, and and there you go for or whatever. You can go cheaper than that. You can go you can get a crappy computer for your kid, like a nice $500 computer off of Amazon, and you just have them do other gaming stream based, and they don't need to buy more than a computer every 5 years or something. They don't need to spend more than $500, $600, maybe $8 at the max for like a kid who's like 12 years old. They need like a laptop. They need like a cheap laptop or like a cheap tower, $500 to $800. And that shit'll stream games just fine on the console market, except it's Xbox Games Pass. And I think the console should die. Even back then, when Saturn charged $300 Sega CD charged $300, and it sucked, and there was like 15 games, and it was like really bad, And nobody would pay that. Nobody I knew had a Sega CD. Nobody. And that's what these consoles today remind me of. Like now everybody's got a console, but it's like kind of like a gamer's revolution, so that's like to be expected. But it's also, I don't know, it's still a bit too expensive for kids to get in. And that's what they need to work on. They need to be selling like the Steam, in my opinion, the Steam Deck. As I recall, they can connect to a TV. The Steam Deck can connect to a TV, right? I mean, I'm fairly sure. But let's just go verify. I'm fairly sure as a console device, it's essentially a mini PC gaming device. Can the Steam Deck connect through HDMI to a TV? Yeah, to a TV? Yeah, like, can it? It doesn't have an HDMI port, so you can't use it with your TV right out of the box. However, you can connect it to your TV using a USB-C to HDMI adapter or a USB-C dock that includes an HDMI port. So for like $500, I mean, the Steam Deck is not a computer. I would encourage the parents to buy a PC, but you know, it's still acceptable to buy them a Steam Deck, I think. The Steam Deck will never do them wrong. It's like the best kids device that's ever existed. And it'll let them play thousands of games over 5 generations and all this stuff. And, you know, and I still think that, like, now the Steam Deck is, like, the best console ever made. I thought it was the PlayStation 4 because it had, like, 3 generations. And it had, you know, Netflix and HDMI and Blu-ray and all that shit. But and the Steam Deck doesn't. But I mean, in terms of accessibility, I think the Steam Deck technically is the best console ever made now. It's got far more access and reach and usability. And I'm fairly sure you can connect the keyboard and the mouse to that thing, and it's got all kinds of apps to make it run. And it's running on Linux, so it's not going to get all fucked up or old. And you know, I don't know. It's hard. You know, I think of, like, I want a new computer coming in June. I want a new computer in June, and I want to take the old one to my, I want to get it clean, professional. I want to get the old one clean and the new one put in my living room, put the old one in my computer, in my bedroom, so it's always running. I just download stuff in the evening and do all my work on the work PC. And yeah. Yep. I don't see why not. And I don't know. I would feel I don't know. I don't really need that, I guess. All I need is a professional cleaning and or like I need an air compressor and blow out this computer. Yep, and then I'll just replug all of it. I'll go, yeah. I don't need a professional cleaning. I just need an air compressor. My stepfather has one. I'll just go use his and clean out this computer really well, and then I'll put a new video card in it, and save the money. By then, a 4090 will be cheap. They'll be like $500. And I'll go 4090 in July, I think. I mean, let's go look at the price of the 4090. Oops, I didn't realize. I did not realize. Did I finish this quest? I guess I did. Nice. God damn it, you knocked me down, dick. You. Okay, so I have season stamps, I guess. Woo, like 4 pigs. Probably pretty good stuff. Yay, turkey. Die, turkey. love this game. It's so much more fun to play than all the other MMOs, I would say. It's kind of sad, but it is. It's like so much more fun to play. There's another harvesting point. I didn't bring sickles again. Damn it. Keep forgetting to buy sickles. I wish Forgundy would get taken by Bastock. I worked hard here to reduce the Beastman influence in this area last week, but we didn't get it. Let's get this good Void Gauntlet Mastery and Rapier Mastery. Stupid Goblin, die! Now, what else? Stupid Blooming Blood taking my Ice Elemental. Wait, this is his camp. I'm not going to take it. He can just have it. Yeah, I'm not taking your Ice Ellie. It's okay. I know that you're farming them. I want the Bad Eyes. Those pay out too. They pay out just as well. Thundaga. Damn it, don't Thundaga me. Stupid lightning thing. Wait, why was that Guardian hurt? This seems weird. Oh, wellsies.
For Shadow the Hedgehog has a bad feeling about this. By 1992, Western markets were still caught up in Genesis fever, but Japan's numbers were rather dismal, so Sega began planning their next big thing, codenamed Saturn, set to be the ultimate pixel powerhouse.
But don't take my word for it. Go on, pop that hood and take a look.
This bad boy was packing not one, but two CPUs, Hitachi's new SH2 chip along with not one, but two video graphics processors, one for sprites and polygons, the other for 3D and backgrounds. The high-end Yamaha sound processor, just one this time, sorry, was capable of high-quality output, like this banger right here. And naturally, the CD-ROM drive itself meant games had loads more storage space for a fraction of the production cost of cartridges.
Yes, that's a lot of hardware. No, it's not normal to have 1 billion processors, not for this era at least.
Originally, Sega wanted it to be a 2D sprite machine on steroids, a Mega Drive on overdrive, if you will, because even though their Virtua Fighter took arcades by storm in '93 with its revolutionary 3D graphics, they still thought
they wanted
consoles
frame
were
rate.
Years away from replicating
Yep,
this.
they wanted
the first
frame rate. They're
iteration of
not
Saturn's
dumb.
design was considered
all their
almost
games
done
had good
in
frame
late
rate. All of them.
1993,
Virtua
but
Fighter.
Then the next-gen competition
yeah,
arrived with the
Panasonic,
Panasonic
all of those
3DO
games
and the
had
Atari
good frame rate.
Jaguar, and Sega started panicking about being left behind. An unthinkable
Ooh, I got a
proposition.
point in
Then
Rapier.
rumors started circling about the place.
Let's take a look at the point in Rapier. So we have our two things that we're going to buy here, and then I think this is the last one. Yeah, but... Oh, interruption, yeah, of the... I could just explode on them, yeah. That's cool. Yeah, why not? We'll do it. And then, I don't know, repost. You are briefly invulnerable upon a successful repost, right? Stun for repost to 2.5 seconds. Play the repost counter. And I get cooldown reduction. Maybe I should try repost, actually. Shit, I want to respec. But no, I can't. I'll have to buy down repost. That's fine. That's the next thing I get. Makes it worth it to level Rapier. I'm hitting harder. It's good. Each level I hit a little bit harder.
Station's 3D polygonal power, sending Sega into full freakouts mode.
3D graphics were not only possible, but coming sooner than they thought. So in a real Tower of Power tribute...
Let's take a look at the sandbox.
If you've watched any of my videos in the past,
Thank you,
there's a good chance that you've seen
Mr.
one of these new ads
John,
for the sandbox, targeted primarily
J-A-U-W-N. Thank you for the
at
excellent content from our
Roblox
stream. I'd like to
players
sub
and
to your channel.
developers. This ad campaign takes the questionable approach of directly calling Roblox an inferior product. A bold move, to say the least. I already reviewed the sandbox over a year ago, and my conclusion was that the game is a disaster. It's a janky, boring mess that seems to exist only to attract corporate partners and metaverse speculators. In short, the game was woefully unentertaining, but now they must be getting desperate, considering that they're paying Roblox YouTubers to do their ad reads. Nonetheless, a year has passed, marking the second anniversary of the sandbox's alpha launch. With a $4 billion valuation and hundreds of millions in venture capital funding, it would only make sense to expect a high-quality experience, especially when they so brazenly claim to be a better game than Roblox. Without further ado, let's dig back into the sandbox and see how the metaverse has evolved over the past year. I can't wait.
I can't wait.
Mom, we've got a problem.
This is an article called "My Wife of 4 Years Gave."
You're watching John.
The Sandbox is a PC-exclusive game owned and operated by the infamous Animoca Brands, a Hong Kong-based venture capital firm focused on Web3 projects. Web3 being a fancy label for NFTs, cryptocurrency, and other associated technobabble. Pitched as a game to topple the industry titans of Roblox and Minecraft, the Sandbox primarily focuses on user-generated content, specifically custom characters, objects, or games, which they refer to as experiences. I've only played Roblox a handful of times, but I'm well aware of the freedom the platform offers for developers. People are making some pretty impressive things using Roblox, and there's plenty of opportunities to monetize your creations, controversy notwithstanding. This is where the Sandbox attempts to get a competitive edge. In their metaverse, you create content that you truly own and can monetize freely, thanks to the implementation of cryptocurrency. But I could own a Lamborghini, a paperclip, or a pile of manure. Ownership alone isn't exactly a great value add for the consumer. It's gotta be an interesting game, something fun, something people actually want. Otherwise, why would anyone care about owning it? Before entering the Sandbox, you'll have to create an account. I understand if you want to try the game out for yourself, but allow me to warn you first. Once you've given the
Oh, is it dead? Yeah, that Rustmon.
Yo, what is up guys, it's P9 back at it again, and today I'm teaming up with LabLab to play Wipe Day on my server Koth, or KOTH, or King of the Hill, or whatever you want to call it. The server uses Rust mod assets, but other than that, isn't exactly like other Rust turn servers. For starters, there is a safe zone and you travel to different islands to loot, PvP, and raid bases. As long as you're not in combat mode, you can extract by typing the safe zone command in the chat and store your most valuable loot in your vault. There is several NPCs which offer you quests that you can do to upgrade.
No, it's too much of a kid's game. I was just like taking a look again. Gonna go back and just look for anything interesting. Go back home, damn it. You're slow. Oh, yeah. Thank you,
a series that in its first
for the
entry
excellent
showed
content
just how
like the
bonkers and
subject.
hilarious the RPG adventures of the 2000s could be. And following our look into Two Worlds last year, looked to sit proudly as a hidden gem of the so bad it's good Elder Scrolls at Home genre. But what of its sequel a few years later, with another swing by Polish developers Reality Pump at striking action RPG gold? Did they in this second entry carve out a truly memorable RPG epic, or once again deliver to its players an experience so silly that even the NPCs are outraged?
Right, that's it. I've had enough. I can't believe it. He kicked me in the bollocks.
Well, my friends, today we find out, as we dive into another outing with a series that's practically impossible to take seriously, for an experience that you won't soon forget. My name's Mitch Mannix.
It had
This
a
is
good
the
gambling
insanity
game.
of Two Worlds 2. Two Worlds 2 opens with an introduction, taking an unfortunate departure from any mention of the land's dangerous infestation of the taint, plaguing the lands of the first game, most likely following after a number of rather spicy Google searches from the Polish developers, but following on directly from the first outing, with our hero and his sister in the clutches of Gandahar, who's clearly still keen on exploiting our sister, despite her dope newly acquired Mage NES accessory headgear, and who has come down with an unfortunate case of Fire God Possession Syndrome. But as we all know, Kandahar, with medieval Darth Vader looking to turn this to his advantage.
Your flame flickers in the wind, Ezra.
Following the group therapy session, we are dragged back down to the dungeon, just before a couple of orcs jump out from the shadows and quickly make short work of the guards in an attempt to break us out, with the female orc then introducing herself in one of the most mid-2000s intros I've seen in a while.
3, 2, 1. Anywhere I'm at, turn the city up. I could flip a dial to $1 million. I don't like to brag, but I'm really young.
Getting introduced to some of the other orc rescuers, our female friend explains a little around why they are there, while also seemingly trying to fight the urge to fire her own eyeballs out of her skull. She explains that they have been sent by an oracle that leads the last of the orcs, and promises to explain more when they are safely free from the castle. A jailbreak that has not gone unnoticed by the castle guards.
My lord! Something happened!
Something happened. Give this man a raise. With Gandahar sending out his second-in-command to get us back, infuriated by it all. Either that or he's still pissed about all of this interrupting his din-dins that he was busy enjoying while wearing his comically oversized bib, with the alarm being raised, leading to actually a pretty awesome fight between Gandahar's henchmen and one of our orc friends, with another orc mage dealing with the guards covering their escape. And while watching, I can't help but be reminded of the rude interruptions suffered in the first game. With the castle's forces attempting to slow us down even more by reducing the frame rate to single digits, we end up cornered, allowing us to get a first look at the game's combat, which in this first offering oddly consisted of our hero spinning around while laughing maniacally to himself. Which I have to admit, even after playing the first game, I didn't see that one coming. But with the guards subdued, the escape is made, barreling through a portal, arriving at alarming speed.
Wrong food away.
Ooh. As well as other alarming revelations, such as our hero being flung upon his female companion and leaping on the opportunity by going very much for the Charles Manson school of seductive facial expressions, maneuvering himself one small twitch away from a place on a register. Now out of the castle, arriving at the Orc camp, a feat that insanely only 9% of players have actually achieved. I wonder if that's a bad omen. We get introduced to some of the game's controls and mechanics, galaxy brain ideas such as putting sprint and sneak on the same button, and interact sharing a button with jump, leading to while playing through the game and scrolling through text, giving way to some less than intimidating beginnings to combat encounters.
Don't say I didn't warn you.
At the Orc camp, we learn the basics of both ranged and melee combat, use an environmental trap used to dispatch some clearly deaf orcs, a mechanic that the game never uses again, and get a chance to explore for some supplies.
What do we have here?
Do I want to know? Crossing a nearby bridge, we meet the oracle that the orcs have been following, as well as unlock the base hub of the game, that features a blacksmith, player storage, and a teleporter that after retrieving a personal teleport stone from an orc and a lumberjack, we can use to reach the game's main islands. A highly useful teleporter, but one that's located in what's quickly sounding like the most dangerous location in the entire game.
But you should be able to use it to access any teleport we've connected to. As of now, that means the one in the camp and the one in my room.
Following the oracle shaving a couple of years off of my lifespan.
Where can I find her?
She's here.
You handle yourself quite well.
Jesus Christ. We step through the teleporter to begin the true adventure. The Two Worlds splits across 3 islands. An adventure carried out by the player's created character, assuming the role of the hero. But unlike some RPGs, how the character is created does not have any impact on their abilities or the game's narratives, aside from with our hero donning the forehead of champions that is far more capable in combat than any other combination of his limbs. The game's 3 main chapters consisting of a number of main and side quests to get stuck into, with the former now and again featuring some branching choices for the players to make, deciding to side with a troubled student or their professor, or later trying to figure out if this creature is a witch or just in fact a very clapped old woman. None of the branching stories really have any long-lasting impact over now and again leading to the odd silly death, but still nice to see even if it's just for the illusion of choice. Two Worlds 2 sports far more quests and side quests than the initial release, but still unfortunately is a little hot and cold when it comes to its voice acting performances. Some on the better side even if they sound like already established characters.
Allow me to apply the finishing touches, and yes, here you are.
Stacked up next to conversations that play out like a face-off in the finals of the Monotone Delivery Olympics.
I'm looking for Eric. I am Eric. Master Kaniff asked me to meet with you. Yes. Regarding your disability.
For the most part, characters are a lot more believable than the accidentally stumbling into an underfunded Ren Fair feeling of the first game, with quest variety also being reasonably varied, outside of course of the mind-numbing boredom of the start of the game's second chapter, but overall the game having some interesting plot lines, playing out in side quests while leveling up and progressing through the game.
Sorry, what?
Scheiße! I just made kid with you.
I sincerely hope not. Full, quite lengthy side quest plotlines, coupled with job boards offering much more quick-fire quests, alongside the main storyline gives players a lot to get busy with during the game's runtime, getting a chance to meet all manner of characters, and uncover a whole host of lore and strange encounters.
Gorlak said you needed a hug.
How about I hug your head with my thighs?
Why is everyone in this game trying to fuck me? Two Worlds 2 also features far more in-game cutscenes to help add some flair to its dramatic moments, such as here uncovering a mage that has been secretly hoarding all of the Tiberium. Cutscenes of course helping to add to that fantasy RPG adventure feeling, ramping up the drama as the plotline plays out, but ultimately feeling quite campy, but with that of course having its own charm. Boss battles also make a return, mostly in the form of foes featuring at the end of each chapter, and are a little hit and miss to say the least, mostly due to the game's combat when facing enemies that wield what I like to call the arm flaily death hit stun nonsense attack, when unleashed sporting a hitbox the size of a small country, and getting hit stunned to death, making me feel like I'm going to summon my own fire god. Boss fights that are oddly accompanied by a soundtrack that takes forever to start up, or not start at all, leading to most of the fight playing out in silence, leading to a bit of an anticlimactic, awkward sitting in a dentist's waiting room vibe.
Yeah, that guy, there should be some
Standard
dramatic
enemies range
music.
from
Yeah.
typical RPG mainstays, such as mummies that run at the player like a child rushing to their mother to show them their recently clipped 360 no-scope, to less typical enemies such as dinosaurs. Great to see such a huge amount of variety in the game's foes, and one that directly plays into a feature that is a big staple in both Two Worlds games, that being the alchemy. Getting a chance to combine a massive amount of different ingredients to cook up potions to grant all manner of buffs and effects, including water walking and even potions that will bring the player back to life if defeated, all created using items and ingredients found from foes and looted from locations all across the game's world, and a system that goes far deeper than a lot of other RPG alchemy systems, with additional complexity being a bit of a trend with Two Worlds 2, when also talking about an element that I feel is what the game is most known for, that of course being its amazingly detailed and customizable magic system, whether it's firing off fireballs that spawn the undead after hitting their target, or putting together a force skill to make an umbrella out of baboons. Two Worlds 2 gives players access to a whole host of spell, element, and effects and modifiers to mix and match for crazy and devastating results, and after switching over from melee in Chapter 2, added a huge amount to the game, not only in terms of being formidable in combat, but also seeking out and tracking down new effects and spell cards to combine together, with Two Worlds 2's magic system actually becoming one of its most highly praised systems, and going at least somewhat of the way to smooth over the fact that the game's developers toned down how players are allowed to interact with the world's NPCs, especially when it comes to another of the game's offensive options.
Ooh, lumberjack gloves. Yay! Look at
And
that.
trying to pull
I
some
mean,
shenanigans
sweet.
with the game's traps, no matter how hard I tried.
It's asking for it.
But once again, good to have more options for combat, as after now finishing the game I did find the melee combat to actually be worse than the first game, which is actually oddly
I'm just
impressive.
gonna sell this.
With a very floaty and unintuitive feeling system,
gonna go for
made even
quite a
worse by
lot.
the game's control scheme, that even for a game coming out in 2010, feels like part of the built-in challenge of it all is actually getting the game to do what you want it to do, as opposed to flailing around wildly. An issue that bleeds over once more to the horse provided in the game, that just like in the first title, controls like a chimpanzee high on bath salts surfing on a wheelbarrow, and a mode of transportation that I acquired in the first act of the game and never saw again. despite a number of times even using the call horse button, apparently just for the lols. But I can't exactly say I'm disappointed, as the horse wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed from the start. Overall, Two Worlds 2 for me is a confusing one. The developers clearly put a focus in improving elements, such as the amount on offer, with a massive amount of quests as well as multiple DLC packs also available, further expanding out systems such as the magic that was already quite good to start with, but at the same time, actually making other core systems even worse than the previous game. The game, even so many years later, still has performance issues, and when it comes to the main story it tells, is still pretty forgettable. But I'll still say that both the Two Worlds games still have a place in my heart, simply down to the sense of humour the games have and how totally silly but also charming both games can feel. This second entry, especially in its quests, has so frequently tongue-in-cheek moments that when coupled with the game's unintentionally funny moments,
He's right
such as the hero's sometimes off-facial expressions, or here with some guards with the tiniest of hands carrying out the tiniest of patrols, makes for an experience that perfectly captures what makes some of the 2000s RPGs so memorable. A game to seek out if you're looking to try out one of the most in-depth spellcrafting systems of any RPG, even to this day, messing around with a friend in the game's co-op adventures, or simply want to jump into an RPG that is impossible to take seriously, but filled with its own charm. Two Worlds 2, just as silly a sequel, and a series that I really hope that one day makes a fumbling follow-up. If you're interested in checking out my look into the first game, I'll leave a little card doodad in the top right-hand corner right about now. Please drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for oh so much more. As always, I'm keen to get your thoughts on the video as well as any other RPGs you want to recommend down in the comments. A massive shout out to the channel supporters who help in keeping the content coming. If you're interested in bloopers, outtakes, as well as full exclusive videos, as well as of course being featured at the end of every video, the link to the channel Patreon is down in the description. Thank you again, beautiful people, and I'll see you in the next.
It was funny. Final Fantasy VII Remake betrayed us, yeah. Oh, come on. Suicidal Squad. He does not remind me. Level 1 on max difficulty. Borderlands died twice. Yeah, I would say it did. That's actually kind of funny. Oh, there's an elemental. Let's get him. Yikes. Thank you, Mitch Mannix, for taking content from my stream. I'd like to sub to your channel.
Well then.
Ew. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to jump into a gritty, punishing RPG experience, with a story mode mixed with knockout tournaments, wielding the power of a protagonist that has just finished drinking the whole tavern under the table? If so, then why?
Why?
Either way, you're in luck, as today we're diving into the brutal and dangerously hilarious world of Exanima, which along with sporting one of the most elaborate physics-based combat systems and environments, also throws its players into a world that will not hesitate to tear the player to pieces, despite their endless flailing attempts at looking formidable. My name's Mitch Mannix, and this is the side and head-splitting world of Exanima.
Exanima, never heard of it.
As always, our journey begins at the character creator, first checking out the game's story mode, with Exanima sporting quite a middling amount of options to customize your chosen hero, as well as when choosing some initial stats to get started. But we need a hero for this journey, so must of course call upon the one and only Greg. That's right, for any OG fans of the channel, we finally see a return of that odd bloke that kept following me around in Kingdom Come Deliverance, for a chance to redeem himself. You hear that, Greg? Don't screw this up. Beginning the game's story mode, we find our hero in what would become a trademark state of his, face down chewing on the floor. Getting up, we spend an embarrassing amount of time figuring out how to pick up the lit torch, and started getting used to the tank controls while exploring the room, which even for me, an elderly man growing up on games such as the original Resident Evil, was quite a challenge. Pulling the door Amnesia style, we make our way out of the initial room to begin our whiskey-infused journey, introducing ourselves to some of the locals. As well as getting our hands on an early weapon in the form of a handsaw. Delving a little further, we encounter our first fight. Fight being a rather generous term, as at this early stage devolved quickly into Greg stumbling into and introducing himself to all the surrounding furniture. Oh, Greg, your poor head. This has been destroyed. Is he alive? What's going on?
No, he's dead.
He's coming back. His head is renewed. Greg. And with round 2 going the very same way, despite our foe's lack of skill when it comes to intimidating entrances. Surprise, motherfucker! Down for good this time, Greg quickly got back to it. So fast, in fact, that someone may have forgotten to pick his gear when creating the character, for another attempt at getting used to the game's physics-based combat system. Exanima's combat takes into account a number of factors when facing off against foes. More typical elements such as weapon types and where the target is hit, mixed with more in-depth factors such as which part of the weapon makes contact, the footwork, and positioning when swinging, calculating the speed of the swing and with it the damage output. As seen here, with Greg finally getting his first victory, before stumbling on like a giant baby with a sippy cup filled with Jack Daniels. Moving further into the dungeon, along with searching the game's containers, Greg looked to see if it was possible to break open some of the surrounding boxes with his newly acquired sledgehammer, leading to an argument with the ladder and a series of events that genuinely nearly made me pass out from laughing. Just... can I? Come on, Greg. I don't think... oh. Come on, just get a good hit in. Come on. Go out. Oh, God. Oh, no, Greg. That is involved. Greg, come on. It's not just...
It was funny.
One eternity later.
Okay, well, that's a no on opening credits. To say it takes a while to get used to Exanima's control scheme would be a colossal understatement, but slowly Greg was getting into the swing of things, along with uncovering some additional gear for the journey ahead. Tutorial information for the game is found in the manual upon hitting the pause screen that goes over some of the basics, including the game's magic, that we'll get a look at along with the game's other modes a little later. Delving further, we find a key in some nice leather gear on a corpse, as well as getting stuck in what I like to call the British over-politeness checkmate, with a cheeky ball bag standing in front of the door with poor Greg trying to open it, but once in, giving him a piece of his mind, while taking a piece of his. As with any hard-as-nails RPG, even the enemies right at the start can easily demolish the player, but they are not the only thing to watch out for in Exanima's world, as the game does feature some spicy traps and puzzles for the player to tackle, as in here with Greg getting a swift reminder that even despite running as light as possible, he still has ultimately quite underwhelming cardio. With each death, the player will be able to get up, providing they still have some yellow health left. But once you're down for good, it's back to one of the game's very few checkpoints, and once progressed further enough in the game, the system gets even more punishing. Greg 2.0 did not get off to the strongest start, with Greg choosing to fuse his balls to a wall with a solitary foot flailing around, in what I assume is surrender. But after mustering up some courage, stumbled upon an interesting discovery in the form of a friendly NPC that after some convincing joins us on our adventure, with Greg 2.0 getting a wingman out of what looks to be Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. This companion, as well as being a welcome addition to combat the game's difficulty, will discuss various discoveries with the player and can also be geared to make them even more formidable, while slowly grinding through the deadly halls of the game. Come along, Shaggy dear! A game that for me was so punishing that after reaching the catacombs we only had a slither of life and no healing at all, so were greeted with instantly getting owned upon entering. A situation that with any luck, Greg 3.0 would fix. Exanima has various roguelike elements that encourage multiple playthroughs, both with its story mode and, as we'll see a little later, in its tournament arena mode, with global experience being earned to then use on new characters when playing through the game's story. Starting once more with Greg 3.0, making sure this time to explore to the fullest and grab some of the game's extremely rare healing salves, and learning to pick and choose early threats, sometimes opting to instead sneak by as inconspicuously as possible. Oh, hello. Yes, I'm just here. Oh, no, God. Take me to White Run. Oh, sorry.
It does. It looks like
I seem to
pure
have had too
comedy
much
gold.
sherry. That's right. Keep it cool, Greg. Oh, for God's sake. Now in a much better position, and with a semi-geared Shaggy in tow, we make it and get a chance to explore the catacombs, with this time the NPCs being the ones to embarrass themselves.
Feel my wrath. Oh, shit. Just wait. Just put this. Feel the irony. Wait a moment.
Making our way through the catacombs, it's in the next zone that this run slowed to a crawl, when faced with navigating through the game's very similar looking rooms and corridors. Picking up a compass will grant us access to it via the UI, and it did help, but I have to admit it did begin to get frustrating as time went on. The game does feature a map for each level that can be found, but with no markers doesn't exactly give you a direction about where to go next, still leading me to not really knowing what I was looking for and which set of stairs would lead me where, as the game does not even inform the player of where they have arrived when entering a new zone. Regardless, we pressed on, getting a little better at a time with the combat, while still experiencing confrontations with inanimate objects, such as here with Greg getting utterly outfoxed by a bed frame. But with our endeavours paying off, finding an epic-looking portal taking us to level 4, and with it out of the apparently beginner-friendly zones of the dungeons, with Shaggy apprehensive about the prospect of progressing through the portal, an apprehension that could not have been better placed, as through the portal and into the next levels, Xanima does a stellar job at proving just why the first 3 levels are considered tutorial zones, with various new-looking locations such as the Crossroads and the Archives, featuring not only enemies so strong they instantly turn this RPG into a horror experience.
Oh god, it looks so nasty.
But even a boss roaming the Archives that provides a challenge for expert players, and a total nightmare for the other 99.9% of players. Even when specking into and unleashing some of the game's
real
recently
Dark
added
Souls.
magic,
Oh,
difficulty
God.
does not subside, with the real game beginning once progressing past level 3. As here the player will meet relentless enemies that, coupled with the game's unique combat system, will truly test those that step into it. Made even more tense and hardcore by the game now setting the player back to the entrance to level 4 every time they're defeated, making every encounter feel heavy with danger, with so much on the line, as well as letting us get old Shaggy back from the grave, as we found out that he is not resurrectable with healing items, no matter how many you plant on his face. Now I know what you may be thinking, this is all well and good, but what about the knockout tournament element? Well, Xanima also features an arena mode, where players will be asked to create a character to act as their manager, before being thrown into their base of operations, which allows for recruiting a whole team of combatants to take on the available game modes, including tournaments to unlock some tasty gear as the player progresses. Vendors, trainers, and other specialists can be acquired to further boost your team, whilst making sure to manage outgoings to keep the funds coming in while taking on the game's frequently brutal face-offs. Each set of challenges and available minigames are split into 6 tiers of difficulty, with a wide range of modes available, including solo and team-based duels, brawls using just fists, and even putting together a small team to take on an ogre. The arena mode adds even more roguelike features, with hired NPCs and creator-controlled fighters, slowly increasing in power, as well as with victories earning income to spend on gear to upgrade each fighter for each tier of difficulty. The arena mode includes tournaments for your team to reach for, which reward some of the highest tier gear, as well as seasonal winners to crown the top teams overall. This mode is highly addictive, as well as being a great place for players to get a handle on the game's unique combat mechanics, and may go some way to avoid first encounters in line with poor old Greg. The arena mode is steeped with replayability, and honestly I think should be experienced first before diving into the game's story mode, as was nice to get some more quickfire practice in with the game as opposed to having to restart after every defeat. Overall, Xanima on the surface looks like a bit of a meme game, with player characters, well, mine at least, flailing around and falling over literally everything in their environment. But after spending some significant time with the game, its place in my head of being just a joke and a bit of a laugh could not be further from the truth. The game's small, 7-member strong development team, Bare Metal Entertainment, are crafting something incredibly deep and unique in this single-player RPG title. The game's combat has so many moving parts to it that I imagine would take a massive amount of time to master, and even then still providing nuance to keep each encounter engaging. The game's magic is in its early stage, recently added in the game's 0.9 update, so currently feels more like something fun to try out than a core component, and felt quite clunky to use. The gear in the game is procedurally generated, so gives way to finding a staggering amount of variety when progressing through the story or arena modes. But the real star of the show for me is the feeling of slowly crawling through the game's incredibly dangerous feeling environments, completely stripped of all the perks and confidence that comes with being a force to be reckoned with when playing. The physics-based system did lead to odd bouts of frustration, with it feeling so unwieldy and unintuitive, and I think this will split players down the middle, once the hilarity of the first few hours flailing around just to land a blow starts to become less amusing. Safe to say, if you're not willing to at least spend a few hours getting used to and practicing this combat system, attempting further progression would most likely be quite infuriating. But the more I played the game, the more I uncovered, and I will be keeping an eye on the game as it nears its 1.0 release, although I'm not sure how long that may be, as the game does seem to have quite large gaps between updates, which likely due to the very small development team. And after doing some research, it seems like the devs are focused on making this a passion project to create something truly unique, over simply just a cash cow, which is very respectable. A truly inspiring title, and one that may be worth a look for those looking for a serious challenge, as opposed to Greg, who unfortunately remains constantly falling at the first hurdle, or well, the first ladder. Thank you so much for watching. Have you played Xanima or any other new or interesting upcoming RPGs? Either way, I'm keen to get your thoughts down in the comments. Please drop the video a like if you enjoyed it.
Unique and unforgiving, 3D isometric. Why is it always isometric? Damn it, I hate isometric. I don't know. Mostly positive and very positive. Yeah. Ooh, Soulburn. Okay, I'm in a good spot. I'm gonna hide here for a minute. And go back out again. This looked like a good game.
Sate the algorithm gods. And if you're into RPGs, MMOs, or hey, even just funny videos, you're in the right place. So don't forget to subscribe for oh so much more. I want to give a huge shout out to the channel supporters who help in keeping the content coming. Oh, good lord, they're so beautiful. If you're interested in signing up as a channel patron for all sorts of perks, including behind the scenes, bloopers, and exclusive videos, as well as having your name featured at the end of every... Over the last few weeks on the channel, we've been diving into some of the most goofy RPGs ever released, and it was while doing another deep dive into the topic looking at all manner of games that I stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. Something that makes any and all entries to ridiculous games look like nothing in comparison. An adventure game and a tale that truly has to be seen to be believed.
Is that better?
Today we take a journey into the absolutely mind-blowing world of Limbo of the Lost, a 2008 released adventure game that has so many layers to its insanity, it's a challenge to know even where to begin. But begin we must in this deep dive into one of gaming's most insane experiences by far.
What are you doing up there anyway?
My name's Mitch Mannix, and this, my friends, is Limbo of the Lost. For those lucky enough to be familiar with this title, you're probably aware that the game after its release was hit with a whole number of plagiarism claims, after the game clearly borrowed an embarrassing amount of assets from some of the most popular games of the time, some of which are so blatantly obvious it's hard to imagine how the developers thought they would pull it off unnoticed. So keep an eye out throughout the video to see how many you can spot on this insane journey, and we'll circle back at the end to go through a whole rundown.
Every gift tells a story.
No, this looks bad. Oh no. I know that sound. It's the sound of a bad eye. Oh no. Heal. Okay. Take the bad eye away. Like over here. Yeah. Oh, fine. Fine. Go, go. Attack. Attack the bad eye. Go. Hwa, hwa, sha, sha. Hasha, hasha. Wah, wah. Yes. But, oh, I don't know. I'm gonna go out there, I guess. The next time, I'll come back to those roids. No, I'm gonna go out there. I am gonna go out there. That's fine. I'm just gonna go to my target. I'm gonna save this time. I'm gonna save one of these. Save location. In 2 days, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Stupid thing. Die. Die, you. Yep. Beastman seals. Beastman seals. Go. Attack, 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 attack. Fight the elemental. Blah, blah, blah. I could start Dragon's Dogma over again, I guess. I don't know. But no, the sequel's coming, so screw it. Paralyzed? Oh no! Well, now I'm boned. Gotta go run. Don't bind me. Blizzaga, no, it's gonna kill me. Oh. Ouchies. Can I make it through the door before you land something? We're gonna see. Oh no, Blizzaga. I'm running. He can't land it. He can't do it in time. If I get in the door in time. You. Go. Yoinkers. I stole death from him. He's like, what? Oh. Yep. I'm gonna go pee real quick. I'll be right back, guys. Sorry. Okay, head to pee. Sorry about that. We're gonna go back out again. Okay. Circuit shield. Cool. Then I guess that's it. Which is okay. X Anima looks really good. I want to put that on my wish list actually. On my here, yeah, I'm here. Unlock. Okay. I really like rapier. Too much aggro. What the fuck? Too much. You sent too many mobs on me all at once. You're stupid. Look at that. There's like 4 of them. Fuck that, dude. Like, why design your game like that? Come on now. Yeah, did you all drop? You should drop. Yeah, fucking drop. Yeah. Ew. What? Oh, shit. Fucking missed him. I fucking one-shot that guy, though. Dick. Ew, ouchies. Yeah. What? What? Fucking die, you. Die. Oh, yeah. Oh, did I aggro you? Of course I did. Son of a bitch. Ugh. Expensive on potions, but that doesn't matter. Whoa, what was that? Me, bitch. Cool, I got a Void Gauntlet point. There, I like this thing. This thing's awesome. It roots him, huh? Okay. You don't see me. Aw. He's like, yes, I guarantee you I do. I don't know. Yeah, I do see where else I have to go. Okay. Good if I pass that dude, which is annoying. Just gonna raffle stomp you from the get-go. From the giddy. Go. Yep. Quit. Ooh. That hurts, huh? Yep. Oh. Dick. What? Oh no. Ouch. Asshole. What? Hee. Purify the water of the square. Ooh. Alchemy crate. Now, what else? Am I mining? Yes, I'm mining. So, good. Am I mining the thing next to me? No, I'm mining the thing far away. That is okay. We'll put this on this one. There we go. And yeah, I want that thing. Give me that thing. Did I get this one? I did. I'm done. Cool. Go northwest to that one. Ho! Love this game because it's not really interested in punishing you very much, which I like. I need to find a... I don't know. I don't know what it is. Yeah, it was up there. It's right there. Yeah. There's a corruption breach one, but I don't want that one. Just drop it. Yeah. And then out we go directly south. See, this game isn't interested in blocking you from leaving the town. You know, there's a lot to be said about New World's like willingness to really try not to make you angry, or you know, there's like stuff that it does that's really annoying that it hasn't fixed yet, but it's overall like pretty good at providing an experience that isn't really interested in punishing you very much. Or wasting your time, I would say. So where I'm going is like over there. That one, not that one. Going like the fairly backwards route, but I mean it is a route. It works. Squish. I mean, they keep talking about this. Let's look at the Two Worlds 2 magic system. Yeah, let's look at a deeper look at the Two Worlds 2 magic system here. Thank you. This is a deeper look at the RPG with the best magic system. I'm gonna like and sub to click for gameplay. I'm gonna.
Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. There are many RPGs out there with great magic gameplay. The actual system behind those spellcasting mechanics is usually really simplistic. I'm not saying that as a bad thing, of course. These systems don't need to be extremely deep or innovative in order to be good. Things shouldn't be complicated just for the sake of it. But every once in a while we can see some amazing ideas in games, and unfortunately, more often than not, they get overlooked and completely forgotten. The magic system from Two Worlds 2 is one of those examples. This open world RPG was pretty mediocre in general, but the magic gameplay was amazing. It was held back by everything around it though, so it didn't have a fair chance to reach its potential. No one really tried to replicate this system or take some inspiration from it, although that's not surprising at all because it seems really hard to do and especially balanced properly. So you're probably wondering what the hell I'm talking about if you never played this game. Why exactly is this particular magic system so good? You might remember that I already have a similar video about this, which I published back in 2019. I wasn't really happy with that video, to be honest, and it's been a while since then, so I really wanted to make a new one. Anyway, the magic system in Two Worlds 2 allows the player to create its own spells. If you played Oblivion, you could think this is something like the spell making system from that game, but it's a lot more superior. A lot of people love this feature in Oblivion and Morrowind as well. It's not hard to see why. It feels rewarding when you make something by yourself and see it perform in action. That's probably the main appeal when it comes to these features. To start making spells in Two Worlds 2, you need to have an amulet and some magic cards. The first slot is for the effect card and the second is for the carrier. Before we go deeper into this system, I want to show you the simple fireball spell and the process of making it. We open up the amulet and select the fire effect card along with the missile carrier cards. In order for the fire missile to actually do some damage, we need to add the damaging modifier that's on the left side of the screen. And that's pretty much it. We put the amulet on the hotbar, select it and fire away. Even though it takes a few extra steps to create the most basic projectile spell, it's not too complicated. But let's see what else we can do with this fireball spell. By the way, if we didn't add the damage effect card, we could still cast the fireball, but it would just blind the enemy for a couple of seconds, which is like the totally different spell. These cards on both sides are modifiers, which means that each of them will modify the effect of the spell in a particular way. Besides the damaging effect, we can add a homing modifier card, which will basically give our spell a lock-on system. And it works really simple. When you start casting the fireball, you will automatically lock on the nearest enemy. Then we have the ricochet modifier card. This modifier is pretty self-explanatory. Upon impact, the missile will ricochet and it looks like this. But the thing is, you can actually stack the ricochet cards, giving your missiles multiple ricochet effects. Now, do take in mind that each of these cards have to be bought in the game in order for you to use them. For the purpose of making this video, I obviously cheated a bit to get a lot of cards, but if you want to play as a regular mage in this game, you will need to have a lot of gold. Especially when you want to stack cards, because you'll have to buy each of them and you'll have to find a merchant that sells them. Speaking about stacking cards, I didn't mention that you can stack your effect and carrier cards. So if you're wondering how to increase the damage of your fireball, you just simply stack the fire effect cards. The carrier card is stackable as well. In this case, that will be the missile cards. But instead of increasing your damage, stacking this card will increase the velocity of your missile. You could see the speed of the most basic fireball before. It looks like this. And this is how it looks when you stack the maximum number of missile cards. The last modifier card that we can add to our fireball spell is called Spray, and it splits your missile into 3 projectiles. This is where it's starting to get a bit crazy. This is how the fireball spell looks with maxed out damage, velocity, ricochet and spray.
Wow.
Pretty crazy stuff, and we only scratched the surface of what can be done. You might have noticed that the spell won't lock on the nearest enemy when I casted the strongest fireball spell with all the modifiers. This is because the homing effect becomes different when you add the spray modifier. Your missile won't lock on the nearest enemy, but if you manage to hit something with at least one of the missiles, that same missile will automatically track down the next target in the area. After some testing, I'm pretty sure that's the way it works, although the game doesn't tell you this. Okay, that would be the fireball spell, and the same goes for other elemental spells in the game. You can make a projectile spell with other elements as well. Two Worlds 2 have 5 schools of magic, and each of those schools have 3 different effect cards. So where do we go from here? Well, you might notice another row in the spell amulet. There are actually 3 rows in total, which means that we can further increase the effect of our fireball projectile. You could just add some more damaging effects or go with some crazy combinations. For example, if we use the Earth card as an effect in the second row, along with some modifiers, the fireball creates a rain of rocks upon impact. So now you have a fireball with raining rocks. And in case you already forgot, the fireball can split into 7 missiles if you have the spray modifier cards, and each of them can create rain of rocks if they manage to hit the targets. I hope you're starting to realize how crazy this whole thing is, but trust me, you haven't seen anything crazy yet. Now, you should have an idea of how the system works, so let's see some interesting spells that you can make. We only talked about the fire effect and the projectile carrier, and I didn't mention these 2 modifiers on the left side. One of them is used to give your spells increased duration, and the other one is mostly used for creating cast on self spells. Now obviously, this system is not without its limitations, you can't just slap all of these modifiers into everything. Anyway, one particular playstyle which is appealing to a lot of people who play mages in RPGs is summoning magic. Two Worlds 2 definitely doesn't disappoint when it comes to this. Basically, each element effect card is used to summon different creatures. But since this system is really flexible, you can even make your summoning spells a lot more interesting. While you can definitely just make a simple summoning spell, it's a lot more fun to come up with a crazier idea. Check this out. We can create a trap which inflicts some frost damage when triggered, releases a couple of lightning projectiles, which will then summon skeletons upon impact. Yep, that's a thing, because why not? Or how about this? You can create a rain of anvils, which obviously does AoE damage, but then you can combine that with a tornado spell. And as you can see, the tornado anvil madness will now follow you and do some serious damage along the way. You can even control it in a particular way to start levitating.
Nice.
It's just one of the examples of how this magic system encourages you to be creative. There are a lot more unique effects that you can come up with by combining a couple of spells. As if one single spell can be crazy enough with multiple functions. Besides those crazy spell combinations, you can also create some regular spells that you would expect to see in a game like this. You can walk on water, make your jumps a lot higher, become invisible, and so on. That should be enough to convince you how crazy this system is. Like I already said, the whole premise about creating your own spells is great, and I wish more RPGs would start including similar features. The problem is, a lot of developers nowadays seem to be overly concerned with balancing. I'm not saying the game shouldn't be balanced, but after all, it's a single player RPG. Who cares if you can find a couple of ways to break the game? I'm just saying that studios should be more concerned about creating fun gameplay mechanics rather than trying to focus on balancing that much. Even though I had a lot of praise in this video for the magic system in Two Worlds 2, I have a hard time recommending buying this game now. Why? Well, the business philosophy of this publisher is really shady. They implemented microtransactions into this single player RPG a couple of years ago, and they released a DLC that's, how to put this, awful.
I should have become an engineer.
In most fantasy RPGs, it is very common for the player to be able to
Thank
wield
you,
magic.
Pentagram, for
Quite
the
a lot of
excellent
memes
content
about
from
magic
Mushroom Up, like the
users.
sub to your channel.
One would argue that a fantasy game without magic would really feel like something is missing. That being said, I generally think that games tend not to be that imaginative when it comes to magic systems. They often feature a wide variety of spells that can do tons of different stuff, but most of the time it always comes down to pressing one button in order to perform a predetermined action. Though I have been able to enjoy this system, I think that in the end it is not different enough from other gameplays and does not make the player feel like a mage. Magic is most of the time linked to intelligence, and the classic representation of the magic user is the old maid with a long beard, suggesting that learning magic takes time and dedication. That is generally not reflected in the gameplay, sadly, and magic users tend to just become random dudes wielding what is basically a gun with special ammunition. However, there is this one game that you might have heard me talk about if you follow this channel, and in which magic is just different. Outward. Outward is not a perfect game. It has its problems, but they tend to be overshadowed by the many qualities and brilliant ideas that make its core structure, and magic is definitely one of these. Outward's magic is described as ritualistic, and what most people mean by this is that in order to cast a spell, you need to perform a ritual. Yeah, I know it's quite an advanced definition, but bear with me for a moment. Most spells in Outward don't do anything on their own. They are literally useless. All of the spells require conditions and combinations to actually do something. The easiest example is the Fireball. You see, there is no Fireball spell in the game that you could attribute to a quick slot. There is, however, the Spark spell that is, according to Seth,
this piece of shit.
and he is quite right. However, if you cast Spark while standing inside a sigil of fire, then the spark will actually turn into a fireball. And the spark spell can be combined with a lot of other spells for some different effects, with Reveal Soul to get some mana back, and with Sigil of Wind for a big lightning explosion. All of Outward's spells can be combined with others for extra effects. Some combinations are often quite unexpected, like the Push Kick and Ice Sigil combination, allowing you to freeze kick your enemies in the nuts. Though this system is already amazing on its own, its best representation comes in the form of rune magic. The rune magic skill tree is based on 4 spells that are completely useless if casted alone. They do no damage, no impact, don't buff you. They basically just shine a glowing letter close to your hand. However, depending on the order you cast these runes in, you can get a wide variety of effects. If you cast the rune Shim followed by Egoth, you summon a magical sword. If you cast Fall, then Dez, you conjure a floating lantern. And the funniest of these, if you combine Shim with Fall, you cast a rune trap that will explode if enemies walk on it. These are the 2 runes combination. But if you get further in the skill tree and get the Arcane Syntax passive, you will be able to cast 4 runes combinations that add effects to the ones you already have. If you cast Dez and Egoth, you will get the Runic Protection buff. But by casting Egoth then Dez while Runic Protection is active, it will consume the protection and heal you. I personally wish there was more than the 8 different effects you can get with this system, as there was definitely more combinations they could have done with the base 4 runes, and because we know runes are an entire alphabet, but this would have probably made the skill tree way too strong, as it is already one of the most versatile skill sets in the game. Though it was overshadowed when it comes to damage by DLC skill trees, it is still very relevant because of how good it feels to use and the amount of variety it offers. Now, I do not mean that other simpler systems are bad and should all be replaced by outwards magic. I just want to say that systems like this can really improve the mage gameplay by affecting the mindset of the magic user. Learning to remember and use the various combinations of spells really make you feel like a mage. It makes you feel like magic is something you need to learn, and I really like this. I hope future games can use systems like this one, so mages can really feel like 200 IQ masters instead of just random dudes with laser guns. Though this is definitely fun too. I guess magic systems like Outwards fit a bit more the RP part of RPGs. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, do not hesitate to subscribe, as it helps me more than you think. For some reason, it seems YouTube is...
Yep. So, okay, we finally got out, yep. And,
Docking request accepted.
yeah, didn't I buy Two Worlds 2, but I never played it, I don't think. I know I bought Two Worlds 1. No, I have Two Worlds 2, it's installed. The good old games version, I think. Okay, let's summon a Taiga. But I couldn't get it to play in 1920 by 1080. Last time I loaded it and it crashed my Final Fantasy 2. Which was kind of bad. I wonder if I could get Arcanum to run in screen. That eye, so annoying. Is something attacking me? Oh, it's a proud lion? Okay.
could have shined even brighter. Aspects.
You are not just a normal human. You are the devil. Help! I have seen the devil!
Like Gothic, Arx is another role-playing game that was buried by Morrowind and Neverwinter. It was originally planned to be the third game in the Ultimate Underworld series. When the developers saw EA's conditions for making a third game, they said, maybe we should make our own IP instead. And so in 2002 they did. Nowadays, the game will run right away, no problem. It can go in a weird slow motion sometimes, and I've had a few crashes, so we're gonna fix that. Arx Libertatis is the perfect solution. It fixes bugs and crashes and helps the game run better. As early as the character creator, you can see some definite improvements. There's no downside to having it. So with that out of the way, let's start the game. I'll give the short version. Once upon a time there was a city called Arx. It functioned like any other kingdom, and I assumed that they did medieval kingdom things there. Until one fateful day, the sun started to go dark. The sun. So realizing that all life on the surface was about to end, all the races worked together to move the city of Arx underground. There were some abandoned dwarven mines there that they could put it in, and I assumed that they didn't literally push the city there, but instead cleared out the area, but the game actually doesn't specify. The process took 5 years, and just about immediately after, the races started having troubles with each other again. Except the Skaven Ratmen. They didn't help anybody. Like the dirty rodents they were already living down there. Speaking of races, there are also no elves in this world. My mind tells me there never were any, but in my heart I hope they died of a broken heart or other dumb elf stuff. So this is a post-apocalyptic video game. The surface of the world now looks like the surface of a moon or an asteroid. That's pretty dire, but through using magic to grow crops and other witchcraft, life carries on. Before you can know more, you're right in the character creator. For some reason, the default character really reminds me of Tom Cruise. Maybe it's because of Legend. There are 4 attributes to choose from. Rank, mental, dexterity, and constitution. Constitution is kind of useless.
Maybe
These
it's because
attributes
of
help govern your 9
Legend.
skills. Each row represents a thief, mage, and
He
warrior,
does look like Tom
a few of these
Cruise.
don't give you very much. Intuition will highlight hidden buttons and switches, but you can find most on your own. Archery is by far the worst skill in the game. It's not due to the weapon not being effective. I only found 2
because
bows
the
in
game's
the
the
game.
caster
I never
game.
fought a single enemy that used a bow, so there were barely any arrows to find either. Ironically, there's no point to the arrows. Honestly, when building a character, even intuition is fine, just for the love of God, don't touch archery. Alright, let's get this started. Oh. Yeah, I didn't edit that. That's the beginning. The beginning is like a few other RPGs combined. You wake up in a prison, and you have amnesia. The escape from prison teaches you most of the mechanics you need to know. This will turn out to be only scratching the surface of what's possible. It's also your first introduction to melee combat, and this is it. To make a stronger attack, you hold click longer to charge it up, and there's no block feature or parrying. You just have to back away to avoid an attack. You can get better weapons and increase your skills to charge up faster, but there's no more to it than this. It is possible to recreate a lot of scenes from
Oh no!
That's the highlight of melee combat. Now the most talked about feature in Arx is the magic system. By finding and activating runestones, you learn a new magic symbol. These aren't hotkeyed, you draw the symbols with your mouse. Learning these does take some getting used to. Your timing is as important as the precision. Wrong symbol. There we go. When I said you couldn't cast through hotkeys, that wasn't entirely true. You can store up to 3 spells at a time for quick casting, but you do have to draw them first. The magic system is so in-depth that it deserves its own section in the video. For now, let's talk about the visuals.
I remember now. It's the painting one.
design-
I remember now. I remember that game. Had a rainstorm coming. I don't know, let's watch the rest of it. It was entertaining.
So in depth that it deserves its own section in the video. For now, let's talk about the visuals. The art design, especially in the environments, is
good.
fantastic. When it
Yeah.
comes to designing an environment, having your entire setting be underground is pretty restricting. These ended up being some of the nicest environments I've seen in a game from this era. There are a few factors that help this along besides technical graphics looking pretty. A lot of thought was put into the practicality of the environments. When normal areas have something as mundane as a kitchen or even a room that just has a toilet in it, it really sells the more fantastical areas. Everyone's underground, so every so often you'll see these big air vents around. You see all these little touches everywhere that make the world feel practical somehow. This kind of thing is more common today, but very rare back then. Sure, some things like character models don't look as good as something like Splinter Cell or Virtua Fighter 4, but the environments really won me over. On the other side of presentation, the sound design is a mixed bag. Like the visuals, once again, the environments have the best of it. The ambient sound effects are some of the best I've heard in a game, period. I always wonder when an ambush is coming. Even the character movement sounds will change depending on what kind of armor they're wearing. Once again, the atmosphere excels. But then you have the voice acting.
To Luneshire, to our good king.
The game was constantly reminding me of Deus Ex, and it wasn't just the gameplay, it was the voice acting.
I eat chicken. I spill my drink.
There's some stellar voice acting work, but the random NPCs are so strange. There's a kind of charm to all of it.
Think well, guys. We're gonna need it.
Thanks.
Open gates. Let the dusty human in.
Strangely enough, the main character sounds like he couldn't give a damn what's happening.
I think it is time now that we helped each other.
Yes.
And she never came back to the stall. Nobody has seen her, and the guards are far too busy dealing with the illicit attacks to do anything about it.
I will discover what has happened to your little girl.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I wondered why the side characters had such good direction, but the main character seemed so off. Believe it or not, this isn't something I'm going to talk about until spoilers, because it's relevant to the story. That sure caught me off guard. We'll deal with it later. The music is nearly non-existent. The soundtrack, if you can call it that, is built into the background ambient sounds. It does set the mood well, and when the ethereal music creeps in from time to time, it sticks out more. However, it's nothing I'd call memorable. There's not even an audio slider for music, just ambience. I won't stop all of it. The gameplay in Arcs is impressive for just how much you can do with it. Out of combat you can pick locks, steal items, and talk to people like you'd expect in many RPGs, but it goes beyond that. You can repair your items at anvils, create new potions or ingredients using a mortar and pestle. The game has a hunger system. If you go fishing, grab your catch, then throw it into a fire where it'll cook for you. Any raw meat you harvest from an enemy can also be cooked. You can fill a bottle with water, get some flour, then combine them together to make bread dough. You can then put it by a fire and watch the dough rise in real time when you cook it. That's kind of insane. If you feed a dog some meat, he'll start following you around. If you see some mice scurrying around, throw some cheese in the ground. Arcs is full of tiny details like this. What makes it stronger is that it doesn't ignore these tiny mechanics. If anything, mastering them can open up easier ways of approaching a situation. There's one part of the game where you're having goblin issues. Now you could run in and kill all of them, but they're not all tiny goblins. Some of these are NBA goblins, so you could work at a different approach. If you do some sleuthing, you'll find out the Goblin King is a bit of a hermit and he just stays in his room eating cakes all day. Do some more sleuthing and you'll find out that the king is allergic to wine. So you can go into the kitchen and spike his cake mix so that the cook is unknowingly poisoning the king. This doesn't kill him, but it does obliterate his intestines so he has to run off to the bathroom. Then, when he's sitting on the crapper, you can have your impromptu audience with the king. You'd find something like this more often in a point-and-click adventure game, but no, it's a role-playing game. You can bash doors open, get a pickaxe and mine some gems and sell them, go gamble your fortune away or maybe win a lot. Patrol mines are on strike and not profitable? Go buy the shares, they're low. Go solve the problem. Now sell the shares for high. There's no doubt in my mind that if I were to keep replaying this game, I'd find something new every time. The problem comes from the first time you play. This game does not hold your hand at all. Very rarely the map will be marked. Progressing a mission might be talking to a single NPC to get moving. You might have no idea you need to talk to somebody, you'll just wander around. This is not at all something exclusive to Arcs. A lot of adventure and role-playing games in the 90s were like this. The idea is that you'll keep exploring the world and doing side quests, and these can be hard to find also. To achieve the good ending, you need to do some exploring. Doing it is not part of the main quest, so trying to blitz exclusively through the main quest isn't recommended. You're missing some of the more interesting moments, equipment, and XP. Please stop. So what about magic? Well, you can learn about 40 spells in the game, and that's not counting all the hidden ones. There's at least over 50. Not all spells are exclusively for combat, so here are just a few things you can do with it. Enchant weapons, cause paralysis, levitate, reach stuff with telekinesis, turn invisible, raise the dead, treat yourself, super speed, activate a teleport portal, turn off a force field, use magic to get rid of your hunger. America needs this right now, doesn't it? Summon lightning butterflies that I think are damaging them. Make your game textures look blurry like Ultima Underworld. Wait, what? Summon a chaos demon from beyond our world that hates all life. Unfortunately, all life includes you. There's a fix for that. Use the control demon spell so it gets rid of rats for you. All of this begs the question, why would you not focus on magic? Well, you should. Magic and melee isn't just the best way to go. It's basically the only way to go. When you don't have spells prepared, casting in combat can be tricky. You can mess up a rune needed for your spell, or you could just run out of mana. If you don't have potions to chug, then you better have a backup weapon. When you're good at your spells, there's nothing like it. The game has a lot of runes, and unfortunately, some are very similar. From time to time, the game fails to detect them properly. I swear it changes based on either what room you're in or what's in front of you. Here's an example. I want to cast Spasium, that big C up there. I'm trying, but it's just not happening, so I'll look back at the spellbook. It has a demo of the shape, but that looks less like a C to me. It's an unfinished rectangle with a shorter bottom side. The rune itself is a big C. If we look at the Create Field spell, we can see Spasium is in the list for it. That symbol, though, looks like a really complete box. So which is it? This symbol, that symbol, or the other symbol? You would think the game would give some leeway and try to figure out the exact spell you're making, and it does, but sometimes it just flat out starts detecting the wrong rune, and it's not even close. Alright, let's try drawing the tar symbol. It looks like a Z. It keeps detecting which is a horizontal line. This one keeps thinking it's a horizontal line going the other way. Ugh. This game was made in a lower resolution, so I can try that. Now it's seeing a vertical line going down. This is hell. How about the lowest possible? At this rate, I'm just making it as wild as I can, but it's still detecting straight lines.
Yep, and that's why you don't do systems like this. They were terrible. And that's all I have to say about this. Yeah, I don't want to hear any more about that game. Oh no. This is new. Yeah. Thank you, Kira TV, for the excellent content for my stream. I've liked the sub to your channel.
What happened here? Holy sh! I am God! Listen to this! Chorus of alarms! That took you 5 years to come up with that piece of... You need to just go do something else. Go work at McDonald's. I guess now the hot time.
In January 2021, the world was introduced to a thrilling zombie survival game that promised to define the genre and change the gaming landscape forever. Very quickly, it gained popularity, with fans commenting their excitement, before long rising to the #1 wishlisted game on Steam. No small feat for something coming completely out of nowhere. But the good times were not meant to last, and over the coming months, people began learning more about the developer of this promising zombie MMO. The end result is one of the most insane stories to ever exist in the games industry. So come with me on this feature-length journey chronicling the entire life and death of Steam's most fake game, The Day Before.
This was a very, very good looking trailer. I mean, it looks amazing.
This looks good, chat. This game is going to be pretty cool, I heard. Alright, let's see it.
The day before's initial trailer was full of promise, a pitch that was equally ambitious.
Thank you, Kira TV. I've liked and subbed to your channel.
For this reason, even at the early stages of existence, people were incredibly skeptical about what was being shown. And after all, why wouldn't they be? The day before announcement had arrived at possibly the worst time for a promising, albeit far-fetched trailer. Just a month prior, on December 10th, 2020, another game had launched after a decade of promises and trailers, painting a compelling picture, but delivering something that did not meet expectations. Cyberpunk 2077. With this game came a renewed criticism of the games industry's ability to present deceptive game footage years prior to the release of a product that seemed a million miles away from that expectation. This was not a new concept. Cyberpunk was just the latest and perhaps largest renewal of the conversation, becoming the most recent example of how deceptive a trailer could really be.
Yep.
Cyberpunk reminded people of the very real downgrade of graphics and gameplay that they'd seen for years, how a trailer was nothing more than a marketing tool, usually being polished for months to display a concept of a video game that may not currently exist in any meaningful way. Designed to be presented on massive stages such as the now dead but previously annual trade event called E3, shouting to the world, this is what our game is, what we hope it will be, or sometimes just an outright lie. So, given that people were already just burned with one of the largest game launches in history, the day before came at an unfortunate time for selling hype and promises. But what exactly was it about the day before that was causing many eyebrows and suspicious glances upon immediate arrival? Well, to start with, the trailer was so heavily scripted and lacking in how any real human would play a video game that it almost comes off as a parody. The game screamed fake right from the jump.
Running out of fuel. Great, man. Awesome. We'll look around here, I guess. Shall we split up? Yep. I'll find out what's in the skyscraper. Okay, and I'll look around here. Let's see what we have here. Alright, alright, alright. I have found a great cowboy hat. Tell her everything's alright. And there aren't any more guns in the valley. Easy, cowboy.
This is, of course, not the first time that a company had used a poorly scripted and badly acted segment during a trailer purely to convey how they expect their game to be played. In fact, the game that the day before was very clearly visually based upon had also done this just 3 years prior at E3.
Hey, wait for me. Yep, I see him. Don't aggro him yet.
Let me adjust my build.
Got my crossbow and chem launcher.
Now keep that talk of similarities between the Division 2 and the day before clear in your mind, as we will come back to this later. The rest of the trailer displays very little in the way of actual gameplay, and absolutely zero if you consider that this isn't how people play games. If you treated the trailer like a proof of concept for how they expected people to play, as a trailer that existed to give you a feeling of the game world but admittedly not actual gameplay footage, it would make slightly more sense as a concept. But what people were seeing was scripted interactions, absurd scenarios, and something more intangible. Something about the trailer just didn't feel right. The protagonist takes on 3 heavily armed players alone, without taking damage, using just a sidearm, just scooting along within seconds, as if nothing had happened. And at just the right moment, a horde of zombies appears as if from nowhere, flooding the lobby of a building despite the streets outside being absurdly quiet. The whole thing just looked and felt like one of those uncanny mobile game ads where the gameplay on display is utterly incomparable to what the real game looks like. The movements, the decisions, everything just screamed fake. This was not a developer controlling a character within the world, interacting with systems that already existed. This was something else entirely. Now in hindsight, the trailer seems incredibly stupid and lacking in substance, which would make you question, why? Why were people so hyped about this? Why did people care? But the trailer did what it set out to do, and that is to convey an idea of what the game could be. Essentially to advertise what the players will be doing, finding things, fighting players, and surviving zombies. For this reason, it was a successful trailer. Though in truth, people should have been treating it like a concept artist drawing and nothing more substantial. That being said, it's not how people treat trailers usually. They have expectations, rightfully so, that unless otherwise stated, a trailer represents something that does exist. This is not always the case, as many games have shown us over the years. If you thought movie trailers could massage a bad movie into a fantastic short trailer, maybe even conveying a story that doesn't exist, well, the games industry laughs about such restrictions. Instead of massaging footage and adding nothing extra, they can instead spend weeks or months creating a pixel-perfect fabrication without a single element existing in the real world. There is no constraints to this other than how much time, money and experience you have to put the trailer together. So aside from the trailer feeling and looking fake in terms of how it was portrayed, simple concepts do exist when judging games from a surface level perspective, and the day before was failing here. So what I'm talking about is that if a game is from an indie, small or unknown studio, you expect less in terms of graphical fidelity. This is due to high quality art and animations being a massive bottleneck for development, one that is only overcome with many talented artists working tirelessly for long periods of time, which of course means lots and lots of money. As a result, the day before trailer presented an immediate red flag with just how fantastic it looked. If you didn't know any better, this would look clearly like a very well-funded team with a large number of employees and experience. Either that, or it was a lie. Those are the most common explanations when you compare with this situation. So going back a little bit to talk about the Division comparison, people noticed that the forced cringe audio of the trailer was not the only thing similar between the day before and that game. The graphical style and world also looked strikingly familiar. So much so that the very first controversy surrounding the day before sprouted up from this similarity. Before any substantial information about the game existed, people took one look at the trailer, another look at where the developers were from, and decided that there was only one conclusion: theft. This almost entirely came from the fact that Fantastic, the developer of the day before, was based in Russia. This was of course a stretch with no evidence. After all, how could an unknown Russian developer get their hands on Ubisoft game assets and then brazenly parade them in front of the world during a game announcement? Still, the accusation quickly gained traction and even merit. And if there's one thing that is for sure, when people are suspicious about a video game, they will begin to analyze everything until they find what they're looking for. And so they did. Within the first few days of knowing the game existed, people noticed that the visual similarities between the games was simply smoke, but they had also found the fire. The day before logo, front and center on all promotional material, was almost an exact replica of the Last of Us logo. In fact, when making videos about the day before, to make my thumbnails look as similar to the game's font as possible, I literally used a tutorial on how to recreate the Last of Us logo, and it looked almost identical. So at the bare minimum, the day before was being liberal with their usage of other people's work in their game. While they hadn't stolen anything per se, they were copying homework word for word, just in their own handwriting. So while there was no real theft of game assets, people had this feeling, and that feeling had led them to very real evidence of something being off with the game. Which just goes to show how easy it was from the initial trailer to tell something was going on here. And while this of course isn't proof that the game was some kind of elaborate scam, it was all the proof people needed to feel vindicated in their declaration that something was off about the game developer. So at this point, Fantastic could never win. The slate would never be wiped clean. Everything they said or did would be almost forensically scrutinized. A terrible position for a small game studio, but one that they had put themselves. They gained all the positives of winning the popularity contest, including the potential life-changing opportunity of such a massive audience patiently waiting to buy their game, but so too had they gained all the negatives. The only way they could truly win against the public's opinion here was to deliver the game that they'd shown. If it was good, all the negatives would quickly vanish, leaving them with a monumental indie success story, one that we've seen often. Instead, the coming weeks were full of additional discoveries, and the narrative was growing much quicker and much larger than even the game's hype. The start of this came from Fantastic's developer history, which they made no attempt to hide. Well, at least for them, the day before was not their first game. Simply googling the name or clicking the developer tag on Steam would take you to a list of products they'd already worked on previously, games that they had abandoned very quickly after taking people's money. Now once is an accident, twice is a coincidence. 3 times, well, 3 times is a pattern. Fantastic's first game released into Steam Early Access in 2017, The Wild 8, a multiplayer survival game with a top-down view that was surprisingly well received. Unfortunately, within a few months of Early Access, Fantastic apparently sold the game to their publisher, Hype Train Digital. This was done while the game was still unfinished, essentially abandoning the game to somebody else's custody. The next one to be released was titled Dead Dozen, which released again in Early Access just 1 year after The Wild 8. This time, there was no positivity about the launch, instead a complete lack of attention before an even quicker kick out the nest to the awaiting pavement below. After that, they made a phone game by the name of Radiant 1, which was a 40-minute long single-player narrative game that launched at a few dollars, and is the single bright spot in Fantastic's career of video game development. So at this stage, people had all the evidence they needed to light their torches and grab their pitchforks. The day before had nothing substantial present and a highly suspicious history. But of course, failure isn't a crime, and if Fantastic ignored the mob, they could have probably just moved on. Instead, they decided, for the first time, though definitely not the last, to make things much, much worse. When Fantastic realised people were digging into their history, they simply wiped their YouTube channel clean. Where previously there existed videos of their long since abandoned games, now there was only one, the day before announcement trailer. Years of the YouTube channel remaining unchanged, but suddenly now is when they decide to delete the things that people had just discovered. Coincidence as an explanation for any of this had long since lost credibility. Instead, every additional small action added to the growing pyre, ready for someone to strike a match and watch it all burn.
This isn't the YouTube channel for this new game. This is just the developer's YouTube channel. So them removing their prior games that they worked on means they kind of don't want to highlight those things, you assume. And also interesting is if you go to the developer's website and you click on what games have you worked on, they don't list the Dead Dozen. So the Dead Dozen was by far the worst of the games that they've released so far, and they just are pretending on their website that they didn't even make it.
At this stage, just about everything that could publicly be discussed about the day before had been stripped naked and paraded through the streets, and so the internet moved on with their lives. Until March of 2021, where Mytona, the publishing company above Fantastic, who is the game developer, reached out to press outlets and content creators, stating that there was a live stream coming soon that would show something exciting. There was little to no details, only that on March 31st at 9 PST, it was showtime. The day before this live stream was due to begin, Mytona, who were working closely with IGN to broadcast this announcement, declared that the event would be moved back 1 week until April 6th. On that day, fans appeared in the thousands to discover what this exciting announcement could possibly be. Perhaps a beta test, something to address the criticism, and answer to any of the many questions people had regarding the shady nature of the developer. What they found instead was simply a logo on the screen and some music in the background. This continued for 2 hours before the Fantastic Twitter account posted a message addressing what they described as technical issues. These so-called technical issues continued for 7 more hours, making their exciting announcement stream 9 hours of music and a logo. It was at hour 9 the Fantastic took down the stream and posted again on Twitter, stating that the event was now postponed until further notice. On April 9th, just a few days later, they were back live on the IGN channel. This time, they presented a 13-minute gameplay trailer that showed an incredible number of features that were absent from the initial reveal. It starts out with off-roading a vehicle through a muddy area, moves on to a closer display of the looting and shooting mechanics at a gas station, before heading to a farmhouse showing destructible terrain, teasing a PvP event with heavily armed players, and the trailer ends with the players running into the vehicle, closing the door behind them and fading to black. During this trailer, a keen eye can see a large number of small features that could otherwise be ignored, but will become vitally important to the story a little later when we compare the trailer now to what happened in the end. Things such as mud and water splashing up the vehicle, the suspension bouncing as the 4x4 moves over rough, uneven terrain, the breaking of the farmer's fence before exiting the vehicle, running through wheat that moves with the character, the opening and closing of doors, things that add ambience and depth to a game world that do require many dev hours to perfect, though seeming small on surface level. All in all, the trailer did a much better job of showing the minute-to-minute gameplay of the day before in a slightly less scripted manner. Still, everything people had discovered about the developer thus far didn't suddenly go away. As a result, the top comments in the new trailer were all either jokes or criticisms of what was shown, mostly relating to the presentation style, which was becoming a running theme with the developer. They'd put someone in charge of controlling the main protagonist who had terrible aim, moved incredibly slowly, and with a stiff, almost robotic action, but most importantly, the trailer still just felt off. All in all, it did nothing to convince those who were now of the opinion the game was a scam, but it did drive a massive number of eyeballs and a growing interest in the day before, whether for the actual game or just for the drama. The biggest and likely most overlooked issue with trailer's release is the way that it was delivered. Now that people knew it was a simple 13-minute video to be shown during the initial date of March 31st, it was worrying to say the least. The delay to the release date could be forgiven, as sometimes a few finishing touches or last-minute issues could cause a brief delay. But when the new date arrived on April 6th and fans were left watching a logo for 9 hours, that was simply a head-scratcher. After all, showing a video on a live stream is something that an actual child could operate, and this was being presented by IGN, one of the largest video game outlets on the planet, with a simple task that they had extensive experience doing. The only real explanation here was that Fantastic had somehow messed up the most basic of tasks. Now this simple mishap seems tiny, but it showed that even the very basic handling of the day before's public perception was simply a bridge too far for Fantastic. They were taking the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of having access to a small studio's dream, a massive audience with interest in their game, and fumbling it every step of the way. While this is, in the grand scheme, small details, it signaled to everyone paying attention that the road to release was going to be bumpier than the trailer's off-roading experience. So before we continue, it's important to take a temperature check of where the community was at with the day before, as I've so far only presented the overwhelmingly negative and critical side. There was, in truth, two sides to this story the whole time. One group was that of the skeptics, combing through every frame of every trailer, breaking down every detail imaginable, and labelling the game as fake, the developers as scammers, and the whole situation as ridiculous. On the other hand, there was a group of people that ranged from the wait-and-see gamers who refused to join in the witch hunt, as well as people on the other end of the spectrum who took it upon themselves to defend it against the overwhelming criticism and what they labelled as hate from a mainstream bandwagon of angry gamers. Basically, this could be summarised as the old haters versus fanboys argument, though really, most people fell closer to the middle of this spectrum. One very interesting question was being asked by the people defending the day before, which needs to be discussed in this video in order to progress the story. This question was twofold. Firstly, how could the game be fake if there were multiple trailers showing gameplay? Secondly, and most importantly, Fantastic and the day before hadn't taken a single cent from the public. So what was in it for them? Effectively, why and how could this be a scam as so many people adamantly believed? If nothing was gained, what would be the point of it all? Now, in response to the first point regarding gameplay on display, this could be answered very easily. It is commonly known that it's possible to build what is referred to as a vertical slice of a game and show features that work only in a very specific way, in a very specific area, without handling any of the difficult parts of development, giving off an incredibly polished and substantial view of a game that doesn't really exist beyond that small example. Add in things like post-processing, interface elements after the fact, and the nature of pre-recorded footage being easy to orchestrate, and that gives you the answer. This is why hype trailers can be considered a waste of real development resources and serve only as marketing material to drive potential future sales, because much of what is built in a trailer is work that might never be usable in the real game environment. Of course, this is not a rule of thumb. Gameplay trailers do exist, and teaser trailers are usually labelled as such, but it is possible. And in terms of the money question, well, they were right. They were absolutely correct on that one. No one had lost money from the day before, not a penny had changed hands. There were no pre-orders, no crowdfunding, nothing. So what could Fantastic possibly be gaining by by lying about or misrepresenting its existence or substance. At the time, people speculated that the answer to this was a scam happening to investors and partners like Nvidia and not the public, which is plausible. It was never ruled out. But the real answer came with Fantastic's next move. Just a few months later, in October 2021, all became increasingly clear.
Prepare to stream something amazing after the event. What does that mean? Is something coming today, Lindsay?
You've just seen some new videos from the day before, and you know the release date. We're looking forward to delivering the day before for you. And now we have something more. Our second inner team at Fantastic has been working on something super fun over the year. We're happy to show you our new game, Prop Night. Join Prop Night open beta right after the event.
This was Fantastic's first move to cash in on the hype that the day before generated. They had millions of eyeballs on their every move, mostly for negative reasons, and they were now going to leverage that attention for financial gain. They had baited their audience, haters, fanboys, and everyone in between, to watch an announcement expecting a playable version of the game that they were excited for. This was orchestrated carefully and done in a way that does not happen by accident. Admittedly, it was a smart move, but one that again, in retrospect, showed that Fantastic were behaving incredibly suspect. After all, everything they'd shown was difficult to believe, lacking new substance, and delayed. Not only that, but communication was insufficient, they'd already failed to address any of the questions or concerns of the public, and they'd now baited their whole community, as well as journalists, content creators, and all to push out a product no one had asked for and wasn't even related to what people were interested in seeing. They were essentially trading any chance to gain the public's trust in the long term, something they'd already lost, for a possible short-term financial gain, and for a brief moment, it looked like it might just pay off. Prop Night, their announced game, saw a surge of players that, had it not been for the eyeballs generated with this tactic, would have been unlikely to otherwise exist. Unfortunately for Fantastic, the success was as short-lived as the game was mediocre. Again, Fantastic had, by luck or maneuvering, put themselves into a winning position and then tripped over their own feet just before the finish line. Had Prop Night been a compelling, innovative, or at least different enough flavoured drink to the Pepsi and Cola of games like Dead by Daylight, then this could have been a masterful gambit. Instead, it was lacking in any meaningful improvement or difference from its peers, and destined for a sharp decline before a slow march to the halls of dead multiplayer games. Now in retrospect, people were focused more on the gameplay trailer and the issues they had found with it than on Fantastic's inability to handle a single public interaction without either pure incompetence or failed sleight of hand. This event was advertised deceptively for the day before, but contained barely 3 minutes of footage and existed purely to push Prop Night instead. The real issue wasn't with the substance of what they'd shown or done, it was with the intention. But there was one redeeming quality of the event. They finally announced when the game would launch, just 8 months away on June 21st, 2022. Unfortunately, we soon come to find out this was never a real date to anticipate. But first, we come to the first lengthy time skip in the day before saga. Unlike previous short lulls in the story that were full of discovery about the studio's history, analysis of recently released trailers or comparisons and similarities between assets and logos of other products, there was nothing really left to discuss. The only new footage that became available was part of an Nvidia partnership, which showed very little more than what we'd already seen. Almost nobody paid attention to this, nor was it meaningful in any way. The next big news came in early May 2022, just 1 month prior to the game's announced release date. And as you would have guessed if you paid attention to the runtime of this video, or if you're familiar at all with the story, this was a hefty delay to the game's release. The first in what would go on to become a habit of game delays. While before they had delayed trailers and other announcements, this was the first sign that the actual game development was not going to plan, certainly not as well as the trailers attempted to portray. But, as with most of the story to date, Fantastic had put themselves in a good position, even with this bad news. You see, Unreal Engine 5 had just been released a month prior in April 2022. This was making a massive buzz in the gaming industry. Their showcase was now one of the most widely discussed developments of a game engine in recent history. Fantastic's video game had little to no footage shown for a while, had a massive question mark hanging over its head, was clearly not ready to launch, but luckily for them, They'd just been saved from an optic nightmare by the fortunate release of this game engine update. Unreal Engine 5 had arrived just in time to give them the perfect excuse to push back their game. Not only would it give them time to work on things that clearly wasn't ready, but most people were immediately on their side. Where they would usually have heavily criticised such a lengthy delay, people were apparently happy to wait, so long as the result was exactly what they wanted, a next-generation, revolutionary open-world zombie survival MMO. And people were so excited about Unreal Engine 5, how could you not want this game to have that? So the wait began, as the delay took the game into 2023, March 1st specifically, just over 2 years after the game was first announced. For the next few months, the day before Saga should have been quiet. There was no footage to speak of, no news, nothing related to the game at all. But in true fantastic fashion, there was a discovery that sparked a new inferno of criticism that had previously died down to embers. Fantastic had released a video, as well as a section of their website which described what they referred to as volunteers, specifically how they used volunteers and how you too could become a volunteer. The description was a real head scratcher. Fantastic's culture is based on volunteering. Every single member of the company is in fact a volunteer, which makes no sense, since a volunteer is, by the very definition of the word, someone who freely gives their time or labour, and therefore paid employees of the company could not be a volunteer. This led to common sense interpretation that Fantastic were using the idea of even full-time employees being volunteers as a way to obfuscate the fact they had a substantial reliance on unpaid labour within their business, perhaps even as a way to shield from criticism and muddy the waters of just who is a volunteer and what are they doing in regards to the game development. When people discovered this, it became another avenue of attack for critics, who were rightfully discussing the issues with using unpaid labour for things that clearly should be paid. Just another arrow in the quiver of doubt, which was now packed tied to them Fantastic's staff budget. In response, Fantastic tried to style it out, stating volunteers only worked on things such as localization, a job that would be expected to be compensated financially, as if this would change the public backlash that was clearly not based on this single topic, but the culmination of events thus far. Not just that, but community moderation was also left up to these so-called volunteers, a decision which very soon would come back to bite them, but not before Fantastic gave another answer as to an earlier question. What were they gaining from lying about a game that didn't really exist? Where was the scam? Well, fast forward to January 2023, YouTuber Big Fry posted a video discussing yet another incredibly suspicious aspect of Fantastic. On January 3rd, 2023, a video titled Life at Fantastic appeared on their YouTube channel. It has since been deleted, like much of Fantastic's history, but they did initially advertise it on their Twitter as a, quote, huge premiere. The significance here is that they were again leveraging fans of the day before to tune in for what was advertised as a look behind the curtain at the game's development. Perhaps they were going to answer the question of whether or not the game was real, which was now considered naive to even ask, as almost all public discourse was that the game was a scam, no further elaboration required. This is not what people got. Instead, the video was yet another barely concealed product placement, another deliberate bait and switch, this time for an app that Fantastic had created, an almost identical situation to the previous event, cashing in any of their remaining credibility for eyes on another product, trying in any way they could to profit from a popularity that they seemed constantly surprised by and clearly not ready to have. The app, which was called Continent, was discovered to be owned by Fantastic. The video even included a link that said, download Continent, as well as a pinned comment with the same, making it very clear as to why this video existed in the first place. Purely as a vehicle to sell an app, not to lift the veil on the day before. And again, almost as if history was repeating itself, as soon as the public called them out on this fact, instead of addressing what had happened or clarifying on their intentions, they simply deleted the links, pretending like nothing had happened, just like they did when they deleted their YouTube videos. People then pointed out the suspicious activity, asking why the links were deleted, and Fantastic's next move was to simply turn off the ability to comment on the video, as if this would make everyone forget what they'd just seen with their own eyes. Now, if you thought this story was a wild ride so far, buckle up, because the rest of 2023 is the most ridiculous thrill ride of gaming incompetence, lies, and stupidity that you will likely ever see. When the day before promised that the game would be unique, they didn't lie. No game in the history of Steam has ever achieved what they did. But first, there was the small case of a legal matter that almost killed the game before it even started. Just 21 days after the veiled attempt at showing their app, and on January 24th, 2023, the Steam page for the day before vanished completely. It was there 1 minute and simply gone the next, totally devoid of explanation. Immediately, people rushed to social media to speculate, some feeling vindicated that the fake game they'd called a scam for 2 years had finally vanished, that Steam had got wise and pulled it off the platform, or maybe that the developers had given up. While of course fans of the game believed it was a simple mistake that would soon be put right. Both of them were wrong. The situation got increasingly muddy when one of the previously discussed volunteers for Fantastic, a community moderator by the name of Wolf, took it upon himself to publish a statement on the official Day Before Discord, stating in essence that this was a simple mistake on Valve's end, that the Steam page had minor technical difficulties, and all would be resolved once the Steam maintenance concluded. This was not true, not a single word of it. Yet another massive communication blunder. This one due to the reliance on unpaid and therefore uninformed community volunteers, as opposed to the trained professional who would have had access to a real press release during any time of crisis. Fantastic later went on to clarify that the disappearance of the Steam page was in fact a complex legal matter relating to their use of the trademark the day before. This trademark was already in use for multiple years by a South Korean citizen who used it on a calendar app. This individual had since filed copyright takedown requests with Steam to have the game blocked, believing that they were misusing his trademark in their product and seeking a legal resolution to the matter. Fantastic declared in their communication that they were only made aware of the situation on January 19th, days prior to Valve's compliance with the takedown requests. But upon inspection of publicly available legal records and documents, this was at best an oversight, perhaps a misrepresentation, or at worst an outright lie. This information was brought to light by Force Gaming, who discovered the trademark records show that at the time of publishing the Day Before trailer in January 2021, Fantastic had not even applied for the trademark. In fact, they never filed official paperwork until January of 2022, a whole year later. According to those same records, Fantastic was made aware of the conflict in November of 2022, meaning they knew their game name was likely to be a point of legal contention 3 months prior to the Steam page vanishing. Not just that, but anyone who has dealt with legal matters will no doubt know there is almost always a letter of intent or notice before any legal process is declared, making it unrealistic to assume Fantastic had only found out about the takedown notices being a threat merely days before they were actually sent to Valve and the Steam page removed. Even if that were the case, they would have known over 2 months earlier that their trademark was rejected due to their failure to dispute the South Koreans' own claim, raising yet another question. How could they be so incompetent as to neglect a trademark for 2 years at every step of the way? Regardless of this, what became clear is that Fantastic's game was in a legal battle for their very name. The result was multiple of their YouTube videos being removed, the Day Before Steam page being removed, and months, potentially years of legal fees ahead of them before the name could be used again, if it ever could. The legal battle then began in Korea, where Mytona, the parent company, disputed the application of the calendar app's name in regard to an unrelated product such as a video game. Along with this came yet more bad news for the Day Before fans, another delay, this time moving the date from March 1st, 2023 to an even less certain date of November 2023. After all, no one can put a time frame on a civil legal matter, especially when it spans multiple continents, and 8 months seemed overly optimistic. All in all, the Day Before seemed to now be going to the stages of parody, stranger than fiction and impossible to make up. Every step of the way, if it could go wrong, it would, not due to unfortunate circumstance, but of their own making, essentially snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, managing to always place themselves in the right place at the right time, but being completely incapable of capitalizing on their chances. At this time, people were so jaded by the Day Before, expecting that everything they said or did was a lie, that this legal matter was even considered as a conspiracy. Some believed the copyright issue was simply a fabrication, When pointed out that there was real legal action being taken that would cost tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, the narrative shifted. A simple agreement between parties, expend money for a real legal battle, but both parties be in on it from the start. Which raises the question, why did people think this was the case? And some truly believed it was to give Fantastic another perfect excuse to delay the game, one that no one could argue with as it was simply out of their hands as a matter of law. Possibly to even cancel the game and avoid launching and potentially being sued for real by the customers. Of course, conspiracies are usually sexy, reality is often boring. This situation could simply be explained by Hanlon's razor, never attribute to malice, that which is adequately explained by stupidity, and Fantastic was to date defined by exactly that, stupidity. This situation alone would have been crippling news for any company and their fans, but for Fantastic it was just another day, and also the beginning of much bigger issues. They released a new gameplay trailer on February 3rd, and this was seen as yet more vindication for those who accused the day before and Fantastic of theft. This time, it had real merit. Unlike the previous accusations with the Division's art assets and more like the Last of Us logo, they had shot for shot copied the trailer from Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War Zombies. You can look at them side by side here, and you will see that this is an identical recreation. They wasn't simply using the trailer of somebody else, they were just recreating it with their own assets. Which again is why people started to immediately take everything they'd done before and started to compare that to other games too, which showed that yes, this was really happening with a frequency that was impossible to ignore. And again, to be clear, it wasn't that they were literally taking assets from other companies, they were simply creating an exact replica for seemingly no reason at all besides being devoid of their own creativity. A situation that was inexplicable. After all, how could you know the internet is calling you a thief for stealing a logo for 2 years at this stage, and yet brazenly shot for shot copy another incredibly popular game's trailer? They had to know. So to this day it remains beyond comprehension as to why they would do this. Were they purposefully creating controversy just to remain relevant? Maybe that's the answer, but what we do know is that they did it and never addressed why. Instead, they fought back against the critics, releasing a statement that still exists on their Twitter feed. We all live in a time of disinformation and lack of fact-checking. Anyone can say anything for views, and everyone will believe it. Disinformation needs to be dealt with, as it can harm not only us, but also other indie and small/medium studios. It also has a mental impact on the members of such teams. After the release of the day before, we'll think about how to help novice developers deal with fakes and allocate resources for this. Destroying is easy, creating is difficult. A very powerful statement to be sure, one that clearly addresses YouTubers such as myself, who to this point had only really given opinions on what had happened and speculating as to why it had happened. This statement could have aged very well if everyone had been wrong about the day before. The game could have released, and then they could have revisited their words here, pointing out how quickly the so-called hate mob jumped on their small studio, trying to destroy their beloved game. But you should return to this statement later to read it with the retrospect of what really happened instead. Until then, things continued to get worse. As Fantastic addressed disinformation from people they said would do anything for views, the next part of the story came from a place they would struggle to argue against: their own employees. On February 13th, a Russian publication posted an interview with insider sources at Fantastic. This interview discussed in detail the internal struggle of the studio, as well as the state of their flagship game the day before. And if you thought things were bad from the public perspective, well, things inside Fantastic were much, much worse. The source describes an incredibly toxic working environment, including mandatory crunch, referring to long work hours to try and meet deadlines, which led to a high turnover rate of staff, with people opting to simply leave the studio rather than continue in such a toxic environment. The article goes on to state the conspiracy theory about the trademark issue was incorrect. There was no agreement. It was a real legal dispute. They also clarified it was just another sign of what they called incompetence of the top of Fantastic in all aspects. Which makes total sense. People were assuming that the higher-ups of Fantastic were some kind of evil masterminds, coming up with grand strategies, when the truth was, they were just really bad at managing their business. Which is, admittedly, much less sexy of a storyline. The article goes on to say that the brothers who oversaw the studio and often displayed in the videos of the day before were everything that is wrong with the development, that they are terrible to work with, shouting, screaming, cursing at employees, changing development decisions direction on a whim almost daily. The studio was rotten at the very core, and these men were the ones responsible. They also go on to describe what many had speculated regarding early trailers of the day before, that they were simply vertical slices, and that most, if not all of the features on display simply did not function in any real game. Just a hype trailer created in a small area designed to market the product. The interview ended, echoing the same sentiment that many of us have been sharing now for 2 years. I strongly do not recommend buying this. Now this is where my previous video on the day before ended. It was a deep dive on the whole saga, with months still left to launch, and with many questions that needed answers. Many of you will be aware of much of this story to this stage, but there has so much happened since then, and the story is so compelling that I believe it needed to be available all in one place, with as much detail as possible. I truly believe this is one of the strangest video game development stories ever, and wanted to do it justice as such. And if you thought the ride until now was bumpy, well, buckle up, and I hope you didn't pick a window seat, because this is where it really goes off the rails. So some of the questions that were still being asked, even though everyone should have known better: will the game ever release? Was any of it real? Did they really do all of this for a kickstart on another game in a silly app?
Now, why
Are
did
the
this
investors
happen?
really being scammed? And what's going to happen next? Well, very little, actually, at least for a few months. There were a few teaser images posted, nothing of substance. There was one video, which was their attempt to prove to the world everything was legit, that all the criticism and haters were wrong. Though all this video did was illustrate that at one time they had a much more original, charming and real looking video game, before they decided to change it up and go for a hyper-realistic, almost Division 2 clone. Many considered the original models and art direction to be an upgrade on what it became, especially considering people had already put together comparison videos of the graphical downgrade of the day before from that initial trailer release in January 2021 until now. By this point in mid-2023, the game was almost unrecognizable, which, spoiler alert, is going to get much worse a little later in the story. On top of that, there was a very weird obsession from Fantastic with pictures of hot tubs and cars within the game. They posted multiple teasers of these, including a sports car driving through an alleged zombie-filled city, but in true the day before fashion, mysteriously it was totally devoid of zombies, or players for that matter, yet again displaying footage that they spent time and money to create, without any real purpose or result, except for confusing onlookers. Next came a quote from Fantastic Twitter, which appeared deceptively written or conveniently placed to appear as if it was a games journalist talking about the day before. The truth is that it was quoting themselves, saying, "The day before will be at the top of Steam wish lists again soon." So to take the temperature again, the day before was at this time considered by almost everyone to be a scam for one reason or another. There was nowhere you could go and see a mention of this game without that being the prevailing sentiment. You've heard and seen why people were feeling this way throughout, but as a reminder, one of the biggest criticisms was that no one had ever played the game or seen anyone really playing it. There was only incredibly curated trailers that felt totally off. This situation could very easily have been remedied by the developers if they cared. And to be clear, Fantastic owed the public nothing. No explanation, no apology, no gameplay, no access, and no game at the end of it all. After all, nobody had paid a cent. This would of course be against their interest as a business, since proving themselves real and the game good would have renewed a massive wave of hype for a game that clearly people were interested in, but they did owe them nothing. If they felt that they were wrongly accused but happy to let the finished product speak for itself upon launch, they didn't even need to produce proof or let people see behind the curtain until it was ready.
You'd be surprised how many people will play a bad game.
But clearly Fantastic did want to prove themselves prior to that day, or at least they wanted to appear to do so. So they took to Discord to make a surprise announcement. This one could shut down the haters for good. A notification went out to the whole server, tens of thousands of users. The day before is coming to beta, and you can finally play it. The wait is almost over. You will see what we've made, and know that you were wrong for doubting. They also said that the test would give an opportunity for players to provide valuable feedback which could improve the final product. This was a huge win for the people who still believed in the day before. A dwindling number of people, for sure, but one that could easily swell once again, especially if the developers were finally confident enough to put their game in the hands of a single living human. This announcement was not alone. They also parroted these talking points in a few interviews over the coming weeks with numerous press outlets. And to be clear, this was totally unprompted. Fantastic had gone out of their own way to announce and advertise this beta, raising the question, would they really be doing this if the game was fake or they wasn't ready? Not just that, but they also discussed plans for launch, which was getting dangerously close. Specifically plans for console launch and whether the game would go into Steam's early access. Now to this point, across multiple years of communication and trailers, early access was never discussed, leading the public to believe the game would be a full release on day one, which is why it wasn't surprising when the Fantastic employee being interviewed also confirmed that they, quote, are not considering early access release. We are planning to conduct a closed beta phase prior to the game's launch. Why am I mentioning this? Well, remember those 2 points for a little later. They become incredibly relevant very soon. After this, things were mostly quiet as people waited for whatever disaster would come next. But for once, in the history of the day before, this time it was good news. In late August, I published a video detailing my toner, Fantastic, and the day before's victory in their Korean legal dispute. To cut a long and rather complicated story short, 2 legal cases existed. One in the United States that needs to happen to fight the DMCA that was issued to their Steam page, and one in Korea to address the trademark's origin. The United States case was on hold pending resolution of the Korean case, which had now concluded in favour of Fantastic. The Korean authorities stripped the original owner of their trademark as it relates to video games, effectively ending the dispute entirely. This would now allow for the United States case to dissolve in short order, as many countries have an agreement when it comes to upholding trademarks or copyright, so a win in Korea essentially means a win in every other jurisdiction in said agreement. Despite this victory, My Toner and Fantastic had now filed a new trademark called Dayworld, which was clearly a placeholder name in case the United States situation didn't resolve in time for their impending launch in just over a month's time. Luckily, it was never needed. Unluckily, this victory was short-lived as things went right back to regularly scheduled programming just 1 month later. On October 30th, Fantastic began their marketing campaign for the day before's launch, which started with what they called the final trailer going live on November 1st. The timing made sense, since this was just 9 days prior to when they'd scheduled the launch date. There was just one problem, however. 9 days until launch? Where was the beta that they promised? Regardless, people tuned in as the trailer launched and were unsurprised to see nothing really of substance that they hadn't seen for the last 2 years of coverage. Other than the fact that the game looked worse than each time before, there were still many questions, but at least it would all be answered soon. Not as soon as scheduled, as the trailer also delayed the game for another month until December 7th instead. The only other surprise was that suddenly, the game was now being advertised as launching not as a full product, instead as an early access title, something that came from nowhere. After all, if you follow the timeline, they believed this game was ready to launch 8 months ago, and the trademark dispute was the only reason they delayed. But somehow, with 9 months more development, it wasn't ready to launch without what is essentially an alpha tag and discounted price? Just another question that would go unanswered, except for the obvious. The game was never ready, and early access could shield them from some criticism if things were not perfect. So this left another question to be asked. With the game now being a month away and having a perfect opportunity for a beta test, were they going to have one? But there was simply no mention of this. IGN fortunately was paying attention, and with a direct line to Fantastic, they asked the question, where was the beta? Fantastic's response would have been much better had they simply ignored the question entirely. Instead, they said that the beta was still happening, but that it was only for Fantastic volunteers. If you remember back, volunteers are what they called not only their full-time employees, but also the people who do their unpaid work such as moderation. So this was clearly a ridiculous thing to do and say. especially after they'd gone out of their way, without prompt, to quiet public criticism by promising this beta. They made no further attempt to clarify the situation, not with IGN, and not publicly to their audience, who they told directly to expect the ability to play the beta, but also that they wanted them to play it to give them feedback and improve the game prior to launch. What this essentially means, reading between the lines, is that they valued secrecy of their game's state more than they did any chance to make improvements to the product. That they were scared to show what they had, and that they were happy to pretend they never mentioned a beta to their fans, instead saying the only people who could play in this beta were people who already had access to the game, or were, according to my own experience, under non-disclosure agreements preventing them from sharing their experience. To be clear here, if nothing else had happened, if this video was 1 minute long, there was no additional context, this one decision from Fantastic would have given you everything you needed to suspect that this game launch was going to be a disaster, to declare that the development studio was rotten and that they were not to be trusted under any circumstance, that this launch was going to be fireworks for all the wrong reasons. And that was true. Fast forward to December 4th, just 3 days before the big finale, and Fantastic again took to Twitter to reveal their truth. This letter was well received, much more than anything they had posted previously, and essentially just says they love their game, their community, and that they were here to update the game for the long future. In this letter, there are contradictions, such as them addressing people who criticize them, saying that they accept it, which goes against what they said in a previous release earlier in the video that describes said criticism as disinformation and that people were not fact-checking. The message goes on to say some things that were interesting about the public perception, things that again become important later in the story. First, they asked people to not accuse them of scamming as they'd not taken a penny, which, as I said earlier, was absolutely true. How could this game be a scam if they hadn't taken money? Except for the leverage used to promote their other products, of course. But that isn't taking money for the day before from customers, so many would say that they were right. Second, they asked people to not call them an asset flip, which, to my knowledge, no one was really doing, at least yet. There had been accusations of stealing art from games like The Division and stealing style from other games as well as their logo and trailer shots, but not of being an asset flip, which refers to buying pre-made assets off a store, making nothing yourself, and essentially just shoveling out a garbage product. This was a very weird inclusion for the game's pre-launch message, which overall read in a very strange way, almost as if they were doing preemptive damage control, preparing for a storm that was on the horizon, closing the windows and heading down into the basement to wait it out. The message ended and left people with mixed feelings. Many people's minds remained unchanged, expecting the game to be a complete disaster, with a small hope to be surprised. But since the game was about to launch, they were going to get a surprise, and discover just how wrong they were. The day before was not a disaster. No, it was something much, much worse.
Its map is lifeless, its enemies are idiotic.
I can't emphasize enough how bad the shooting feels in this game. And if you're gonna charge $40 for a game that plays this bad and has these kind of bugs and these kind of issues and this kind of server instability.
Its PvP is an exploitable mess, its story is pointless, and its progression is downright infuriating.
Fuck the day before.
It's bad. It's just outright bad.
Oh yeah, that is the scam before.
Close to 3 years of waiting, watching, and speculating had brought us all to this moment. Every single detail about this company was heavily documented. Every single aspect of the day before's development was heavily scrutinized, and yet, nothing could have prepared people for this launch. It almost defies belief that 10,000 words of this video script led up to the launch, and somehow, someway, the game was still worse than anyone expected. It wasn't just that the game was bad either. That would have been too easy. It was that Fantastic had clearly lied about what the game was, heavily misrepresenting what to expect from day one until the very moment you paid $30 and opened the game. Originally, and for every trailer, article, interview, description or mention, the day before was an open world zombie survival MMO, but what was delivered was an extraction based shooter game just like Escape from Tarkov. A single, small map with a hub-based city with
Piece
small
of
server
crap.
sizes of a few
Tarkov
dozen
had like
players.
5 maps
On top of
at
this,
launch.
Almost every visually presented asset in the game.
Tarkov was
discovered
good
to
at
be
launch.
assets purchased
It
from
was
the Unreal
genuinely
Engine
good.
marketplace,
It was the
which on
queue
its own
times were
is not
bad,
an
and
indicator
I don't
of
know, it was
anything,
annoying, but it was
in
a
conjunction
good
with the game's
game.
performance, design, and gameplay is often referred to as an asset flip. A game that exists purely to try and make money from bashing together pre-purchased assets with little to no effort going in otherwise. And if we remember, just before release, they asked people not to accuse them of asset flipping, which nobody ever did. But now this is when the accusations began. And we'll not dwell on this too much, as this video is not a place to do a review of the game. I'll just say this: even if the developers had not misrepresented what it was supposed to be, even if we all went in with full knowledge that this was an extraction shooter and not an open world MMO, it would have changed very little about the public reaction. It would have still received massive backlash for just how broken, unfun, and lacking in activities it was. There was next to no redeeming qualities at all, and the reviews reflected that, making it one of the worst rated games in Steam history. Not just because they lied or misrepresented, but because it was a bad game, full stop, no matter what the game was supposed to be. After all, if it released as an extraction game and it was good, it would have received criticism for what they did, but it would have still been played and lauded as a good game. But that wasn't the case. The game was just bad. Now, I do want to give some speculation as to why the game was so different to what they advertised it as originally. The games industry is not immune to the idea of writing checks that you can't cash. It is incredibly prevalent for game developers to overpromise right up until they come face to face with the reality that they cannot deliver what they originally said. There are people and studios famous for this very concept, such as Peter Molyneux and the Fable series. There needs to be no malevolence in this as a concept, because trying to do something and failing is not inherently a bad or evil thing to do. So I say that to say this: perhaps Fantastic aimed to be what they advertised, but at some point they realised they could not deliver. So instead, they stripped down on features and focused on a smaller version of an easier to create game, taking the open world MMO concept and turning it instead to a simple map extraction shooter with smaller player capacity lobbies. This in and of itself would not have been a problem, nor would it have been reasonably considered bad if it had been communicated prior to release. After all, nobody had paid anything, nobody was owed anything. All they had to do was tell people what was going on. However, where this transforms from a perfectly reasonable, albeit disappointing circumstance and reality of game development is when they decided to never mention this fact. Where it becomes what people refer to as a bait and switch, or would colloquially call a scam, is when they wait until they have your money before you find out that the game is not what they said it was, not even the same game genre. But if you thought that was the end, or that things could not get any more ridiculous, you'd be very, very wrong. What happened next was Fantastic saw the criticism and they responded the exact same way they had previously. If you remember back to when they were called out for promoting an app that they created during a video they presented as an insight to the day before's creation, they simply scrubbed the evidence away and pretended it never happened. When they removed the YouTube videos when people started to look up their shady history of abandoning games, they simply removed them. Remember, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. This was the 3rd time that they tried to simply erase the fact that they'd been caught doing something and called out publicly. Luckily, SteamDB.com shows updates to the Steam page, and they were caught red-handed removing tags that they'd lied about existing, such as massively multiplayer. And this wasn't the end of the 3s, as another pattern was about to emerge just around the corner. So let's recap as things move very quickly from here. December 7th and 8th, the game launches. Within hours, reviews were some of the worst Steam had ever seen, with only review-bombed games like Overwatch 2 beating them out. And just to be clear, was this the worst game ever made? No, of course not. There's plenty of bad games, but most bad games usually never get to the front page of Steam, they never go all over YouTube, and they're never discussed by mainstream game publications. Usually bad games release, almost nobody plays them, and then they fade into obscurity, so it's rare to see such a large number of negative reviews on a game that is front and center just like the day before. And also, to address the idea of review bombing, because some people, fans of the game, did believe that this was the case, that the day before was still good, and it was just a victim of yet more hate for no reason. You only have to look at the player numbers to prove that this wasn't the case. Player population was dropping like a rock, showing that people were trying it out and deciding that it was not worth sticking around. If the game was good, people would basically swallow almost anything to continue playing it. But not the day before. This game was basically speedrunning incredible popularity to death like almost nothing seen before. This is where things really should have ended. But instead, just like every other time people said that it could not get worse from here, it did. December 11th, just 4 days after launch, Steam removed the ability to purchase the day before, simply stripping the store page of the Buy Now button, something that is incredibly rare. The Steam page remained, much like a zombie itself, devoid of life. Clearly, things were not going well, but considering the next piece of news, that's actually an understatement. So December 12th rolled around just 5 days after launch, and screenshots started to circulate that showed one of the Fantastic Company founders discussing the game's finances in detail. This showed an absurd, most likely an unprecedented refund rate for a game launched on the Steam platform, perhaps a game launched on any platform. The day before had sold an impressive day one 201,000 copies, with almost all of those units being on that launch evening within the first few hours. Proof that their strategy had worked until now, at least temporarily. Restricting access to any form of beta test had shrouded the project in enough mystery to sell $6 million in copies of the game within a few hours. Something that would never have happened if a single YouTube video showing real gameplay footage had existed on the internet in the days prior to launch. On top of that, refunds as of December 10th, when this screenshot was created, were up to 91,694, a roughly 45% refund rate, which also misses data from the 11th and 12th, which undoubtedly would have included more refunds and little to no additional sales. This leaked screenshot also discusses the terrible review score, which was only propped up with 19% positive, as some people were using those positive reviews to post memes and stand out from the sea of red. It also discusses how much of a financial failure the game had become, while also declaring Prop Night, the game that they previously used the day before popularity to promote, was also a financial failure. These leaks made it very clear that the day before was one of the worst games ever released on Steam, period. At least one that people noticed. And more people than ever were hopping on social media to declare that this game was an outright scam. After all, the original defense was that they had not taken any money, and therefore couldn't be a scam. But now, after launch, after the misrepresentation for multiple years, after now having taken people's money, what other defense could there be? Of course, there was one small detail that people were overlooking at this time, and that was that Fantastic, as of this moment, did not have a single penny of customer funds. Not a cent, not a ruble. Steam do not pay out developers immediately, so it was Valve that had the customer funds, and this was about to become a key factor in the day before saga. You see, Steam's refund policy is rather strict, stating you cannot refund a game beyond 2 hours of playtime, meaning there were potentially tens of thousands of users who were stuck with a broken game which was not even as advertised. After all, the game's server issues at launch were making it almost impossible to log on and play. The performance was so bad that some people were waiting to see if it got better